Supervisor Rex Scott,
Here.
Chairman Peter Yucapicio,
Here.
Mayor Regina Romero,
Here.
and Mayor Paul Dennis.
Thank you. We'll move on to next item, Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's call the audience. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have one speaker in the room with us today. I will introduce this item and then introduce the speaker. Speakers are limited to a 3-minute oral presentation and may submit written comments of any length for the council's files. Call to the audience is limited to 30 minutes. Individual council members may respond to criticism made by those individuals who have addressed the council. However, the council will not discuss or take action on a matter raised during a call to the audience that is not already on the agenda. Our speaker is Bob Cook. Before you begin, Mr. Cook, I'd like to read something, please. Thank you. Please start your comment by stating your name for the record. After that, you will have 3 minutes to address the PAG Regional Council. At the 2-minute mark, I will politely cut in and request that you wrap up your comments. You may now proceed with your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Regional Council. I am Robert Cook, 4-term member of the Pima County Planning and Zoning Commission, former team member of PAG's 2006 Strategic Energy Plan, and original 2-term past member of RTA's CART Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to address the Regional Council. I am speaking to item 11 of the Council's agenda, Carbon Reduction Strategy. I don't see where you can have confidence in your executive director, who has systematically restricted or blocked public comment over many years, especially regarding climate crisis concerns and adapting our transportation system away from fossil fuel consumption. Ignore the tenets of good public planning processes, sophisticated revenue and expense reporting and projections, antagonized City of Tucson representatives to PAG RTA activities, avoided comprehensive performance evaluation, diverted funds which could have been applied to active transportation and public transit projects, resisted fair representation of the City of Tucson and PAG RTA decision-making, and alienating City of Tucson voters at a time when they will be critical to passing any RTA next election. It is regrettable that PAG RTA has abandoned the future-oriented vision of RTA founder, Republican Tucson Mayor Bob Walkup, who would turn over in his grave knowing how this process has evolved. It is also regrettable that the RTA has not taken better advantage of a military expert on its board, General Ted Maxwell. The DoD Climate Adaptation Plan from 2014 and updated in 2021 defines the 3 essential concepts of adaptation, resilience, and mitigation. Adaptation, adjustment in natural or human systems in anticipation or of response to changing environment in a way that effectively uses beneficial opportunities or reduces negative efforts. Resilience, the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and adapt to changing conditions and respond to and recover rapidly from disruptions. Mitigation, measures to reduce the amount.
I apologize for the interruption. You're at 2 minutes. Please bring your comments to a close.
And the final concept is mitigation. Measures to reduce the amount and speed of future climate change by reducing emissions of heat-trapping gases or removing carbon dioxide from our atmosphere. Thank you very much for this opportunity. This was an important message to deliver to you, and I hope you take it seriously. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, at this time, we have no more speakers.
Move on to item number 4.
Mr. Chair, thank you for this opportunity to have representatives from all aboard to present to you regarding their passenger rail project that they've been involved with. Most of you have been involved with this over the years, and we wanted to have an opportunity to give you an update. And I want to thank Mayor Winfield for suggesting and inviting our guests to be here today. Todd, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, members of the council. I'm Todd Liebman. I'm the president of All Aboard Arizona. And I'm also a council representative to the Rail Passengers Association National Council. And I'm joined today by our board members, Jennifer Davis Page and Dr. Ken Carrolls. I've got some exciting news for the council, and that is that we have been designated by the FRA to the Sun Corridor has been designated by the Corridor ID program. And so our corridor is going to be moving forward, which is really exciting. And I know there's been a lot of support by this, by Mayor Romero and all the mayors of the community, Mayor Winfield. And I think that's a testament to where we are today. So thank you very much for that. I'm also pleased to announce that Tucson is going to be the site of the Rail Nation Conference in October of 2024. So we're very excited about that. Basically my premise of my talk is now is the time for rail. We have a growing population in the region, and it's going to be essential that we address both mobility and also contribute to the environment and economic development. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity right now. Funding is available through the IIJA. Arizona wants passenger rail. There's strong bipartisan support. Amtrak is in support of the Daily Sunset Limited, and we're hoping to hear positive news about that. We've got our fingers crossed. We haven't heard on that grant yet, but we're still hopeful. And Federal Railroad Administration is doing a long distance study that's going to enhance transportation to Arizona and the rest of the nation through the Amtrak system. This is a map that shows basically the improvements that would be necessary to get this project moving and complete the project. As you can see, it links Tucson, Phoenix, and the Sun Corridor with the rest of the region, and it's a very exciting opportunity. And of course, that moving forward with this study, then we're going to be able to identify costs, timelines, and be able to get ready to move this project forward. So it's very exciting. The nice thing is the Sun Corridor goes to all the right places. There's been investments on both ends in public transportation, light rail in Phoenix, the streetcar here, hopefully bus rapid transit in the future. And so it's going to link to a lot of transportation opportunities. And it's also going to serve underserved communities, tribal communities along the way, and contribute to economic development throughout. And transit-oriented development can be affordable housing, contribute to affordable housing, and really build new communities and enhance the existing communities. And again, the support is solid for this program. We like to think of the Daily Sunset Limited as low-hanging fruit. This is really a tremendous opportunity. People currently ride it. In fact, the Tucson to LA corridor is one of the most successful, and that's really impressive considering the train runs 3 days a week currently. If we can get the Sunset Limited daily, that will be tremendous. And back through Phoenix is going to be the really the icing on the cake. And that's going to introduce the ability to go from Eastern Arizona to Western Arizona and the whole region. So this is really an exciting opportunity as well. And Amtrak has applied for 2 grants, and we're still waiting to hear. We view that rail, there's no investment that can be made that can be better than rail. We consider congestion mitigation for the busy I-10 corridor. It's economic development. And I like to recount a story from the mayor of Meridian, Mississippi. And he says they planted a flag in their dying downtown at the train station. They rebuilt that train station in Meridian, and he likes to say, John Robert Smith, that was the catalyst for all the positive economic development that's taken place in Meridian since the redevelopment of the train station. So it's really tremendous. It's the greenest form of transportation, and of course, this is a region hard hit by global warming, and so this is a tremendous opportunity for us to take cars off the road and also enhance mobility. And it supports long-term sustainable growth in tax revenue and employment for the region. So that's basically my presentation. I want to thank you so much for having me here today. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have any, but we're always a resource for you, and always feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Any comments?
Mr. Chair, I always end up playing with that, and I know I turned it off. I think it's on. Thank you for presenting this. I've worked with all aboard before on the rail issues. You're right, we've got to move forward on this, the Sun Corridor piece. The map, so to make sure everybody understands, the map that you showed is a lot more grandiose than what the current efforts, as I understand it, for the grants that both ADOT has gone forward with, as well as Amtrak and in fact, a certain output miles, which will stop it just short of the full connection to the sun, something, as I understand. So can you tell us what your organization, what piece of that you are working with and advocating for?
Absolutely, sure. So we advocate for passenger rail improvement throughout Arizona. In fact, we were we've tried to be instrumental, and hopefully we're in the daily Southwest Chief when Amtrak reduced the frequencies on the Southwest Chief. And we've been advocating for a long time for the daily sunset. So currently, the map that we showed is the basically the corridor that Amtrak's talking about with regards to their Connects Us. And so Amtrak has the Connects Us program. And so that does represent, the idea is you would have 3 round trips initially between Tucson, Phoenix, and Buckeye. You would have a 4th that would extend to LA, and then you'd have the Sunset Limited overlaid over that. So you'd have 2 frequencies daily between Tucson and LA, and then the balance between Phoenix and Tucson. So I think that does play into it. We're pretty optimistic about the Welton branch, which is the Phoenix West line. We think there's a lot of synergies regarding freight operation as well, and that UP may be very favorable to restoring that line to service.
Well, thank you for clarifying. The important thing I think for everybody to know is there's the big picture, which is what they're talking about, rail throughout. And then there's what's currently going on through the IJA, which is, I think for our region is what I won't call low hanging fruit, but I think we're in a good position to be postured to get it. It is using current rail lines predominantly. There may be some additions. They will be adding rail stations, and I'm hoping they're going to put one in Tangerine because that'll make it really easy for me to drive down, park my car, and jump on and go to Phoenix.
All right.
And the thing we're going to have the challenge for our region is proving the demand, and that's what's going to the IIJA funding. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of these. Essentially helps us get through like the first 5 years of operations, roughly. At the end of those 5 years, it's got to either be self-sustaining or those federal funds will drop off. And so those 5 years are critical to talk about and highlight from a regional perspective the advantages of using it. It's not going to be high speed. You get that question all the time. It's going to be current rail. But if I can work for 2 hours while I drive to Phoenix and I can make that last mile or two work, I think it's a great alternative. It's got a lot of benefits to it. And I appreciate you coming today and look forward to working with you when it comes time to start really advocating for this and for the usage of it if it comes to fruition. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I wanted to also thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate your commitment to passenger rail. On Tuesday, December 5th, Congressman Stanton announced that Arizona Department of Transportation would receive $500,000 of Federal Railroad Administration corridor identification and development grant. So that is wonderful news for all of us. And of course, we know that ADOT has provided an additional $3.5 million in state funds for the planning effort. So it's lifting, it's taking off. It really is truly all aboard right now. And I received a call from Governor Hobbs just to kind of share in our happiness about this, because it is a good, it really is a good sign from the federal government that they're willing to invest in the planning efforts for Arizona. So congratulations and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Lee.
Chairman, I have a question regarding to, is this gonna affect the I-11? Very close to that.
In my perfect world, the answer would be yes. I mean, I don't know that's gonna, not in a negative way, but I mean, this is the kind of project that could reduce congestion overall. So so this is the kind of thing that could potentially take cars off the road and open up more freeway lanes for other purposes, including people that choose to drive. So it's a win-win situation, really. It doesn't take away from anything, but it enhances. So hopefully, it would be a net positive. And of course, moving freight through the region, any improvements to rail is beneficial to moving freight through the region. So to the extent that supports the highway system that we currently have, I think it's positive.
The others? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Now, we'll move on to item number 5, the approval of September 18th.
I move to approve.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it. Thank you. On to item number 6.
Mr. Chair, as usual, this is just for information only. No action is required, but we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
None. Thank you. Move on to item number 7.
Mr. Chair, as usual, we try to plan for the following year for the schedule of regional council meetings. And you have the schedule in front of you. Typically, we meet the last Thursday of every month. Obviously, December is unique. We try to meet earlier. So you have the schedule in front of you. We had a request from Mayor Romero to potentially meet in May instead of the 4th Thursday in May, potentially meet the following Thursday. And if that works for everybody, that I recommend making that change. Otherwise, you have the dates in your packet, and hopefully you can set those aside.
Comments?
Mr. Chair, May is usually graduation month, and I don't know about my colleagues, council colleagues, mayor colleagues, but our attendance is requested throughout for middle school graduations, for high school graduations, for university and Pima College graduations. So May is a difficult month, and this particular year, I have a senior that's graduating, and I believe it's the 23rd, the graduation day. So either the 16th of May, still kind of going into university and Pima College graduations, but the following Thursday after that would be also acceptable in June.
So if you don't mind, because we're going through the tip process, the following Thursday, the 30th would work really well with the tip scheduling. If that's okay, I would request a motion for approval of the schedule.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it. Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the council. Item 8 is 2 separate contracts, and one of them is for the pavement condition data collection, and that's regional wide. You have the information in your packet. If you have any specific questions, Lance Peterson, who is our project administrator, is available to answer questions as well. But we do collect data for pavement condition for all regional facilities, and we collaborate with ADOT to make sure that we have full coverage. All of our members have been engaged in discussion about even potentially having an opportunity to piggyback on that contract for local roads, so that opportunity also exists.
Questions? Speakers? I look for a motion to approve.
Second.
Favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Item B of that same one.
All right, Mr. Chair, this item is for our activity-based modeling implementation. As you recall, we switched over our modeling effort roughly 3 years ago, and we have an active contract that we've been working on. We do see an opportunity to enhance the model. So the request is for a change order to that existing contract that is not to exceed $300,000, and as needed to extend the time period Dr. Han is here if you have any questions for him specific to the modeling. I'm going to refer to him to answer those questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
Move to approve.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Days.
Thank you for being here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all. All right, item 9, Mr. Brown is going to present that item.
Thank you, Mr. Mogimi, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce this action item, which is an amendment to the PAG FY22 through 2026 Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. ADOT has requested a formal TIP amendment to program the full funding of the I-10 Country Club Road and Kena Road interchanges project, which is 2 interchanges combined into 1 project. These funding adjustments are necessary for the project to proceed to the next stage of implementation. To fully fund this project and remain fiscally constrained, this project also includes programming adjustments to other projects as shown in the packet. Additionally, the City of Tucson has requested the deprogramming of PAG's Federal Surface Transportation Block Grant (STBG) funds currently programmed in fiscal year 24 on the 22nd Street I-10 to Tucson Boulevard project. Since federal apportionments of these STBG funds do not roll forward from one fiscal year to the next, the region risks losing the funds if the project does not get authorized and the funds cannot be obligated in the fiscal year that they are programmed. Therefore, to avoid the potential loss of these funds to the region, the STBG funding will instead be programmed in FY24 on ADOT's I-10 Country Club Road and Kena Road interchanges project. This is because the funds can be obligated on this project this fiscal year. As part of a funding exchange, an equal amount of state STBG or ASTBG will be programmed on ADOT's Barraza Aviation Parkway Extension project in FY26. This ensures that the region's federal funding from FY24 will ultimately be applied to an RTA project per RTA board policy. In terms of the committee review process, the TIP subcommittee recommended an earlier version of this TIP amendment at the October 31st meeting. The management committee also recommended the TIP amendment at the November 8th meeting. After the management committee meeting, the City of Tucson notified PAG of its desire to release the federal STBG in FY24 on the 22nd Street project, as previously mentioned. At its November 15th meeting, the TPC reviewed the updated version of the TIP amendment with this STBG adjustment and the funding exchange. The TPC unanimously recommended the updated TIP amendment included in this regional council packet. Mr. Rod Lane, ADOT South Central District Engineer, is here today to help address any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council. We're happy to take questions.
Questions? Move to approve.
I'll second that.
Favor?
Aye.
Nate, want to vote? Please.
All right, Mr. Chair, James Tao is going to give you a quick update on our regional transportation revenues.
Thank you, Mr. Mogimi. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council. Before I begin, I should point out that we have combined the memo and the revenues report while including other fund sources beyond HER. Keep in mind that this report looks specifically at roadway funding and for the most part, what PAG administers. If we look at Table 3 and Figure 1, through September, there was just shy of $45 million in earth and VLT collected across the region. Of that nearly $45 million, PAG collected about $9.2 million, or about 20% of that regional funding. The remainder was distributed directly to Pima County, cities of Tucson, South Tucson, and the towns of Marana, Oro Valley, and Sahuarita. Regional HERF revenues were almost 5.5% higher year over year. Over the 5-year average, we stand at about 9.5%. If we look at Table 4, it shows HERF 12.6 in detail. So far, we have nearly 7.6 million in the books, which is about 11.4% more than implied by the ADOT official forecast and about 9% stronger than last year. In Table 5, it shows us HERF 2.6 with stronger than expected collections totaling almost 1.7 million through September, which is 13% stronger than last year. And with Table 6 through September, PAG has just over 77 million in an interest-bearing account. Most of these dollars are spoken for. In Table 7, we look at the city and town HERF distributions year to date. Table 8 shows the HERF 12.6 and 2.6 we've already seen. Additionally, we have Pima County HERF and Pima County vehicle license tax, the portion set aside for transportation use only. And in table 9, it shows the previous 5 years and allows us to see how much HERF your city or town received. Table 10 shows us gallons of gas sold in Pima County through various fiscal years. We normally like to see about 13%, and we are currently just under 13% for the current fiscal year. And in table 11, we see about 40.5 million collected in TPT this year, trending for a more than 5% gain over the adopted budget. That also mimics the percent rise over last year's actuals, also over 5%. Mr. Chair, that concludes my update. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you. Evan?
Number 11, yes, Mr. Chair, members of the council, our air quality guru, Mr. Fitzpatrick, is going to present on this topic, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have afterwards.
Hey, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Regional Council. I'm Dustin Fitzpatrick, Air Quality Manager, to provide an update on our carbon reduction program.
Hold the mic a little bit closer, please. Thank you.
Certainly. Okay, so the bipartisan infrastructure law funded the carbon reduction program, and FHWA announced in April 2022 a requirement for each state to develop a carbon reduction strategy. EDOT consulted with PAG on this requirement in April of 2023, and then in October 2023 released a draft carbon reduction strategy, requesting comments from MPOs and their member agencies. PAG distributed the draft to our member agencies and submitted comments recommending the addition of 8 projected outcomes of programs aligned with our CRP activities, on top of the 9 outcomes listed in our OWP that were already captured in the draft. EDOT submitted their final carbon reduction strategy to FHWA last month and will be required to update the document every 4 years. And FHWA also just recently published the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Performance Measure Rule, which will require states and MPOs to establish 4-year declining emissions targets by February 1st for the state and July 30th of next year for the MPOs. So PAG's priorities were approved by this council and include the CRP eligible activities approved by ADOT and FHWA, and are included in the OWP under work element 40, outlined in goal numbers 20 through 30. As mentioned in the prior slide, there are 17 projected outcomes of the programs that are aligned with CRP activities, which include 9 projects supported by consulting services. In your packet, there's a memo from November 22nd detailing those contracts and their benefits for greenhouse gas emission. So we currently have active contracts for multimodal performance assessment, man pool subsidies, the traffic count program, and the activity-based model exploratory planning tool. We are in the request for qualifications and contract negotiation stage for the active transportation plan, household travel study and assessment, and microtransit. And selection is pending for orthography data extraction and the dynamic traffic assignment model. So these projects will allow PAG to collect data and establish benchmarks, implement strategies to reduce transportation greenhouse gas emissions, and then track and report out on the results. So the good news is that our efforts to reduce carbon from transportation emissions, which have a global effect, will also help reduce ozone levels locally, which is one of our main air pollutants of concern. So this is because ground level ozone forms from the combination of nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds in the presence of sunlight. And around half of the regional nitrogen oxides come from on-road transportation emissions. So this is a seasonal pollutant with highest levels occurring during the warmer months of April through October. And this graph here shows the recent 20 years of monitored ozone levels in Pima County in blue, and then above that for Maricopa County in orange. So our regions continue to remain in attainment with the EPA standard, which was lowered in 2008 and then again in 2015. While Maricopa's moved from marginal attainment following the 2015 standard lowering to 71st really, and are currently in moderate non-attainment. Every 3 years, they bump you into more serious designation for non-attainment. And next year, in August, they'll be moved into a serious designation. So MAG estimates that the ozone non-attainment is currently costing their region over 100 million per year in that moderate designation. Will climb to over 260 million per year once they're in the serious designation. So, like I said, the greenhouse gas emissions have a double positive effect in reducing ozone by displacing those nitrogen oxides from vehicle emissions. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Chair, I just had a quick, can you give me an example of microtransit? Maybe I should know that answer, but I don't. What is microtransit?
Microtransit, the smaller vans that pick up folks kind of in the outlying areas versus your fixed route larger transit.
So by keeping them more local, we would reduce gases as opposed to having long fixed routes that would have to go far out of the way, like down into Green Valley, for instance, to come back up. Having microtransit down there would be maybe a better way to go.
But one of the goals of microtransit is bringing more people into the transit system that wouldn't otherwise ride it, that are in outlying areas, and enable them to connect into the fuller transit system.
Thanks.
Chairman, thank you so much. I really appreciate this discussion because it really is nice to know and have the copy of ADOT's carbon reduction strategy in front of us, but yet I believe that their plan reiterates what we've been saying all along, that as an MPO, we have to make the decisions and put together the plan that really reduces carbon in our communities. And all of the eligible activities under the federal guidelines are acceptable. I'll say it once more, I'm highly, highly disappointed that there was no more thorough conversation about with this board and with the community about how to reduce carbon in our community, and that the executive director of the PAG took it upon themselves to make the decisions for consulting. We're spending millions of dollars in consulting. And I've asked here before, and I want to ask again because I have not received the appropriate information. Why were these activities selected, and how were committees engaged in selecting these activities?
Mr. Chair, Mayor Romero, I believe one of the slides that Justin had up outlined some of the process. So coordination with ADOT, coordination with FHWA was the first step in the process, understanding the new regulation that came out. After that,
Mr. Mogimi, we have all of that information in front of us, and you've stated that before. My question is, how were these activities selected? Because these activities were not discussed by this board. And how were committees engaged that are responsible for making these decisions in giving advice and feedback on the selection of these consulting programs?
be happy to, Mr. Chair, Mayor Romero. Once we identified what the legislation requires, that information was obviously conveyed to the committees, that is Management Committee, TPC, EPAC. They all had an opportunity to review and comment. We formally put out a letter requesting for comments. We only received one comment, one of the entities. We did respond in writing. Following that, Regional Council had two opportunities to review and comment on the activities. Regional Council approved the activities in May as part of the overall work
Sir,
program.
we approved the budget. We did not approve or have any conversations of the activities. This has been a point of contention since May and before. I have requested that you bring to the table a conversation about greenhouse gas reduction and the carbon reduction strategies program. And we have never seen that item be included in any PAG agenda. Approving a budget and having a conversation about the details of that budget is not one and the same. So I have also been told that the committees have requested this item be discussed at the committees, and that there has been no opportunity afforded to them to have a discussion about what the money is going to be invested in. Now, mind you, this is $11.5 million that this region is receiving for carbon reduction. And microtransit, as much as I love it, and I think it should happen, it does not really have an impact on reducing carbon emissions. And so I maintain that using this level of funding for planning and not giving this board in the community an opportunity to voice ideas and concepts on how to reduce carbon is very irresponsible, especially because this is federal funds that are sent to our region very specifically for carbon reduction program. Planning and consulting is not going to reduce carbon.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Madam Mayor, as part of the process after the OWP was approved, they took that information. The state developed their own plan. State's plan was submitted in November. As Dustin mentioned, again, we put out a request for comments from all of our entities. They also had a comment period, and ultimately the state agreed with the recommendations that we have. It's included in their plan, and it's approved by FHWA. And recently, after the plan was submitted, FHWA came back and issued a new rule, which requires the establishment of targets, which we would have roughly 8 months from today to establish targets. So over the next 8 months, we have to have the information that we need to develop and establish those targets. So it's in line with the requirements from the feds and the state. And other than that, and General Maxwell, you asked this question before, and that we can put that slide back up again, comparing where we are and potentially, if we don't do what we need to do, the cost to the region could be over $100 million a year to address if we end up in a non-attainment area. So we have to establish, can you bring that slide back up? So we have to establish those targets, and we have to have the measures in place. Otherwise, we're talking about 100 million plus a year just to become back into an attainment area. So we're in a good position. The question is, how proactively can we work to make sure that we don't end up being where Maricopa County is? And remind me again, currently it's 100 million and it could be 250 million, you said, annually?
The projection starting next year from serious non-attainments, 260 million.
$260 million
Those
a
are
year. That would be the impact if we don't do what we need
Mr.
to.
Mogimi, I understand that. We all understand that. The explanation has been put out there. My contention is that you have not given the community and this board the opportunity to help plan with you. ADOT's plan basically says the same thing. Their plan reiterates what we've been saying all along, that an NPO not the executive director of the MPO, the board, the representatives of the region, must make our own plan, and that all activities eligible under the federal guidelines are acceptable. And so you have not allowed the discussion between this board and the discussion between the committees that help us plan. You basically presented us a budget and have decided that this is what you're going to spend the money in. And that is one, unfair. And two, it really doesn't allow for the jurisdictions that are appropriated annually these funds the opportunity to be able to participate in this. I know that Pima County is putting together a sustainability and climate action work on their own. The city of Tucson has completed a 3-year process of Tucson Resilient Together. We've done a lot of research and input from our community. We know exactly how to help reduce carbon emissions. And yet we were not given the opportunity to be able to sit down and give input and help decide how to spend this money. It's $11.5 million. And so I would suggest to my colleagues on the board that we, as a board, bring this item back, and that with the help of the committees that are designated to help give advice to this board, that we get their input and see where exactly it is that we need. If we need consultants, then be it. We'll need consultants and we'll go in that direction. But I think it's premature for us as a board to approve this item without the input and feedback of the committees that the Citizens Committee and technical experts that should be giving us input on this item. So that I would request that we give direction to our executive director to go back to our committees and seek input and advice for this board to make decisions on how to spend this money.
So, Mr. Chair, again, if I may, Madam Mayor, this was brought to the Regional Council on 2 different occasions. Regional Council approved it. We have entered into an agreement with ADOT. So this is really far enough along with ADOT that I would request that you allow us to continue to do what you already authorized us to do. The bulk of the work is ahead of us, and our staff are doing a wonderful job of making sure that we have a process in place to make sure the region is ready to address this issue.
Colleagues, I disagree completely with that recommendation. Do we know how much we're spending on consulting? Is there a number attached to the consulting budget?
Yes, it was included in my memo.
No, do you know? Can you please reiterate the amount?
The budget in this year's budget is roughly about $2.3 million. Out of that, obviously, we have our staffing costs. I don't know off the top of my head. I have to look it up, but be happy to follow up with a memo with the details on that.
Colleagues, I would ask that we, for the transparency of the investments, especially federal investments that are coming in, I would highly recommend that we ask our committees that, by the way, several have said they were not given an opportunity to give feedback and advice to us, to remand it back to the committee so that we at least, if the committee says, hey, it's perfectly fine, let's go for consulting, let's spend $3.5 million of the 11.5 that we're receiving as a region in consulting, and they say, let's do it, well, let's do it. But I would suggest, highly suggest, for the benefit of transparency and for the benefit of federal funds that we're receiving, that we remand it back to the committee and have them give them at least the opportunity to give us input on this.
Mr. Chair, I guess I would respectfully disagree, only from the fact that we have heard that the committees were able to be reached out to and weigh in on, and it sounds like only one had responded on that. My other concern is that we have approved within the budget these contracts. And for me, to come up with a plan, as the mayor mentioned, I think is a good idea, but it's hard for me to do it without a baseline being established. And it seems like these are the things that we're going to be looking at, asking about. And then when we establish a baseline on where the concerns are, whether it's micro transit or anything else, then I think it would come back to us to try to determine how to put a plan together. But if I'm doing my home budget and I don't know how much I make or where it's going, I don't know how to put together a budget without having that information. So I'd be concerned that, as we've seen on some of our other issues, at some point you have to move forward with compliance, whether it be the CAC, on RTA or anything else. At some point you have to move forward, but you have to have a baseline, which I'm assuming that's what we're looking at these consultants to do, to bring back this information to see where our issues are.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to even go with kind of a little different angle on it all. One is I would appreciate, Mr. Executive Director Amy, if you could put together one, more importantly, just outline where we stand currently on our carbon reduction plan. I'm going to assume, and that's a dangerous word, I'm going to assume there is something that's currently in place. What you're talking about is trying now to comply and work with ADOT on the development of the we'll call it the next generation of the reduction plan. So I'd like to know where we sit right now on a carbon reduction plan. I agree, Mayor Murphy, that we've got to have the data, and I've seen a lot of data because Phoenix is in a different spot than they are air quality wise. They've been in a lot bigger challenges. They're making decisions that perhaps if they'd gotten on top of it earlier, to Mayor Romero's point, if you get on top of it earlier, we won't face some of those drastic decisions. But I would like to see what we're doing with ADOT, and I've already got that down on notes that I'm going to send out to ADOT folks to give me that information so that I understand where the agreement is. And if what I'm hearing from you, Executive Director, is that with 3.5 million of the 11.5 has been obligated.
So the memo I sent you roughly 3 weeks ago outlines the expenses, and again, off the top of my head, I don't remember the numbers, but I would refer back to those numbers in that memo.
Yeah. So the full 11.5 has not been.
Oh, no, not at all. No, no.
So there's opportunity, and I agree. I'm absolutely not a big supporter of planning to death. I think we do a lot of reports and a lot of planning. And some of the municipalities honestly have the ability to do more planning and more reports, but a lot of municipalities don't. So it's, I would just like to get conversations happen several times, and I think it'd be good for us to get the details that you could provide us on current plan, what the ADOT agreement with ADOT's looking like, and I'm going to check on what ADOT's doing, what they expect from us as well. And then I do think at some point, this is something that's obviously gotten some passion at the board. It needs to come back so that all of us can discuss where we're heading, what direction, if that's the direction we need to go. I'm not sure if we're in a position to even slow anything down on the ADOT side, and being the ADOT rep, I'm going to tell you, I don't think that's a good idea either. So
again, Mr. Chair, if I may, the ruling that just came out, now we have clock ticking. We have to establish a target 8 months from now, and we need the information to establish that target. So we'll be coming back multiple times to give you updates on activities leading to a recommendation on the target.
Mr. Chairman and colleagues, ADOT has submitted their final plan. It was submitted November 14th of this year. And ADOT is reiterating the same thing that I have been saying since May or before, that MPOs, which is what we are, must make our own plans and plan activities that will reduce carbon in our region. I don't know what ADOT has to do with this anymore. ADOT has very clearly said that MPOs are responsible for making our own plans. And I get it. I see consulting. We've done consulting, Mr. Mogimi. We just did a 3-year consulting. We actually did it in 14 months, a climate action plan. It talks about reducing carbon emissions and greenhouse gases. And we paid $500,000 for that plan with extensive thousands of people participating in our engagement process. You are talking about spending 3.5 million valuable dollars that we could put into action. I don't think we should make a decision. This board has the responsibility to ask questions. I don't think we should approve a $3.5 million expenditure out of 11 until we see exactly why we're paying so much money for consulting services. And so I do believe in base setting, and I believe in making sure that we know where we are, but I just think it is way too much money. And I know for a fact that our Pima County representative and our City of Tucson representative and the committee that should be giving input for this decision are very upset because they did not have the opportunity to have this discussion at this committee. So we have been having this conversation, Mr. Mogimi, since May. And not once have you had an item for this particular conversation on its own. And I have not been able to receive the appropriate information and the dates and the input from these committees from you. And I just don't think it is responsible for us to move forward without answers to these questions and the opportunity for the public and the committees that should be making these recommendations to us. Until we see that, it is irresponsible for us to move forward.
Mr. Chair, if I may, so the item was on the agenda at the last meeting. We discussed it at the last meeting. I provided 2 memos.
Sir, and we went round and round and round and round with the same conversation that we're having today, sir.
Mayor, I'm just reminding everybody that it was on the agenda at the last meeting. We discussed it. I did follow up with a couple follow-ups. The purpose of this item again today is to update you on what has happened between us and ADOT and the new ruling. The new ruling, if you can go back to that slide, please. The new ruling is very specific that says that ADOT's going to set up targets and we have to establish targets 180 days after that. So one more, please, where it has that. I just want to reference at the bottom right there. So ADOT's working within the next 2 months or so. They have to have their targets. So they are the lead in this point, at this point. Once they have their targets established, then we are obligated to work with them to establish our own targets, and we have 180 days to do so. That is the time period that I'm going to come back to you multiple times to make sure that we are establishing those targets to meet that requirement.
So Executive Director, so what I would ask then, because the conversation just flipped a little. Okay, I understand that Mayor Romero, your frustration with, but I think we may have already committed some of this money to do this, and I don't think we're not being asked right now. Now, if we want to try to pull it back, or there's a motion to pull, we can. That's another discussion. But what we're talking about right now is what you're working on. What we've authorized in the budget to go work on is to collect the data to be able to establish the targets.
Correct.
The conversation of how we use this money we're getting to then approach those targets will come afterwards. But I too would be concerned if we're spending a large chunk of our money to establish those targets before we do it. So agreed, you set out a couple memos, it was on the thing, but again, last meeting, it also wasn't a vote. And my understanding of this item is there's also not a vote. So that's where the frustration I think is coming on, because we're having the conversations, we're getting memos, then we're having conversations. there's really no decision-making going on at the board. Since the topic came back up after we approved the budget. So I know we made the decision on that. But what I'm hearing you say is, and that's why I asked, I'd like to know what our current carbon reduction plan is. Because I don't want to spend a lot of money on a plan if once we find our targets, I'm hoping our targets will be lower because our air quality is better than it is in the Maricopa region. Then we can make good use of the money to make as much impact as possible. And we might not need to spend a ton of money on a consultant creating a new plan to address something that we're not at the point of panic. And that's not to minimize that we could get there, but we can either spend all our money, keep planning for the next target as it moves. And that's what Maricopa is facing now. They have a plan to keep it moderate. Well, guess what? Now they're moving to serious and they're moving up those levels. And the financial implication at that point becomes huge on what we're required to do, the limitations on businesses and economic prosperity in the region becomes significant for what we can and can't do in the case of businesses. So what I'm asking, my request would be is that we get that information on what the current plan is and how much, what the contract is that's going to help establish these targets so we understand it. And then I think we may have enough information to really have the conversation, Mayor Romero, you're looking for.
I think you're getting to some place that I feel comfortable with, but before we spend $3.5 million on consultants, I think we have to come back to this table and at least get an explanation. What does each category of goal setting and finding the foundation for our carbon reduction is? So I don't want to sign a blank check that says, yeah, sure, go ahead, spend $3.5 million in consultants without at least taking a look at, okay, what is absolutely necessary that we have to spend now so that we can start the goal setting process. And I just don't feel comfortable in just saying 3.5 million without having an explanation of what each consultant means to the work that we have to do ahead.
Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor, in your packet, you have the memo that describes from Dustin which activity is desired to do what. So that information is already in your packet. We'll be happy to follow up with another memo to expand on that again, but it's, as I said, already in your packet. Be happy to answer any questions you have about those individual activities.
Chair, my continual difficulty is until we know, even to put a plan together on these targeted areas, to General Maxwell's point, I don't know where the depth of concern on each one of those areas are. We might be great on microtransit and we can kind of put that to bed, but we might have to put a lot of money in our action plan in some other area, but I don't know where that is until we get some measurement of where we stand today. And that's my continued concern.
Mr. Chair, just to follow up, looking at this timeline, in February of next year, the State Department of Transportation establishes its target. We then have 6 months from that date to establish our targets. Following up on some of the points of inquiry that have already been made by Mayor Romero, what would be the role of our committees made up of our jurisdictional professionals as we are moving towards establishing our targets? What would be their role? And I'm also understanding that when there is a recommendation for those targets, that those would have to be approved by the regional council.
Correct. Yes, Mr. Chair, Supervisor Scott. It's very much similar to our safety targets that we established that goes through multiple committees. And then ultimately a recommendation is made for regional council to accept those targets. So Dustin's going to be busy the next 8 months working with ADOT and all of our committees to fine tune and bring back a scientific based recommendation on what targets do we want to establish. And that's goes back to what General Maxwell was saying as well. Obviously we want to establish targets that I don't want to give you a preview on it, but my recommendation would be to make sure that we establish targets that are attainable and we can have activities that can match that target. So there's got to be some kind of a balancing, going back to what Mayor Murphy was saying, where we're at, what can we do, and how can we establish targets that we know are achievable. And then that's what we're gonna bring back to the regional council, working through individual committees with the recommendation for that target.
If I could follow up, Mr. Chair, what would be the roles of both the consultant that has been referred to previously and our committees? And if you could remind us which committees will be involved in this.
Yeah, so we've early on, we've had this conversation. Our air quality subcommittee is probably the best subcommittee to start with. So they'll be doing more of a working group type of activity and supporting Dustin and his team. Once they come up with some of those recommendations, then most likely EPAC and TPC management and regional council.
And then how does the work of the consultant dovetail?
All that data comes together. So they funnel all their data and all that. Going back to what Mayor Murphy said, we got to put all this data together to come back with a recommendation. So all that information supports the data.
So this is an ongoing process involving our consultants, involving these various committees. There's obviously a tremendous amount of interest at the regional council level. Could we have a standing agenda item where we are getting updates on the work of these committees and the consultants so that we can get a better sense of the process that we're going through as we're going through it, rather than hearing about it 180 days afterwards in summative fashion?
Of course, again, this ruling just came out last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. So this is brand new ruling.
And because this is an important ruling, again, I can't stress enough how much money $3.5 million is out of 11.5. We have to make sure that we're taking action and implementing the 11 point, as much as we can of the $11.5 million for actual carbon reduction. And so for me, I don't believe that it is a good idea to give a go-ahead for all of this consulting and the money we're spending on consulting without really getting an explanation as to why each of these are necessary. And it is pretty outrageous to spend so much money on planning and consulting when we have such little money because of the ruling that we have to react and do something about. And you know, you have environmental quality as part of what Pima County is tasked with. And so Pima County has to respond to the federal government in terms of what we're doing to reduce greenhouse gases and protect our ozone. So, you know, I just don't feel comfortable that we have given enough explanation or presentation as to why these consulting contracts are necessary.
Mayor Romero, I share some of your concerns, and although this is an information item, we are obviously going to have to make some decisions moving forward, and that was why I was asking if we could have a standing agenda item that will keep us continually updated on the work of those committees and how those previously authorized to be expended funds are being utilized. So I'm trying to follow up on some of the concerns that you have expressed.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other? I actually think we're in a good pace. I'm glad everybody's asking the questions you're asking.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, can I just ask a clarification question from you? Do I need to make a formal motion that we have a standing agenda item associated with this, or is that just something that?
Again, so obviously between the chair and the vice chair, you all make the decision. So
I think
you made it.
I was gonna get there before you got there, but you know, exactly the concerns of everybody is my concern too. I think the simple question was, how did you choose, or who chose? That's where we started, and then we got in all over the place. But that you need it, you do need sometimes somebody to put everything in line and get you there. However, I think in part of that standing committee, that consultant should come in here and say, this is why we chose these categories, and I believe that's what you want.
That's right.
Once we get to that point, then we can grill each other again and go through the whole point. Because it is what we're looking at, the overall region of carbon and everything else, and, you know, groundwater, air contaminants, everything, you know, we're all on the same boat. However, I think we're okay. This was more to get to this point and have that debate. And I think we did a good job of it. It's just that I think in one of those meetings, we should bring, that's what I do where I work at. If the rest of the council doesn't understand, let's bring him in and tell me, then you tell me where you stand and what you thought of why he's directing these categories he has to have. And if that's what you were asking
That
for,
is
and I think regional council, that's what we should do. Bring them in one time to give us a good explanation. But some of us might not have been here or maybe didn't see the memo and all that stuff. And even of what their purposes of, you know, their contract is, what they're gonna work. I think it's where we should be at.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to number 12, executive sessions, the motion.
Second.
Council will not move into executive session. taking the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to come
Reconvene.
back into open session.
Second.
Second.
Take care of item number 12. We'll move on to item 13. All in favor of German, say aye.
Aye.
All right, you adjourn now from PAG, turn it over to. our homie.
Can I say all in favor of adjournment?
You can.
Oh, we'll call the meeting in order. Please call the roll.
Mayor Ed Honey,
Here.
Mayor Tom Murphy, General Ted Maxwell,
Here.
Mayor Joe Winfield,
Here.
Supervisor Rex Scott,
Here.
Chairman Peter Yucapicio,
Here.
Mayor Regina Romero,
Here.
and Mayor Paul Diaz.
Thank you. Item 2, call to the audience. Jamie, do we have any?
Mr. Chair, we have 2 speakers, and I'll introduce this item. Speakers are limited to a 3-minute oral presentation and may submit written comments of any length for the board's files. Call to the audience is limited to 30 minutes. Individual board members may respond to criticism made by those individuals who have addressed the board. However, the board will not discuss or take action on a matter raised during a call to the audience that is not already on the agenda. Our first speaker is Carolyn Campbell. Let's step to the podium for the lectern. Thank you, speaker. Please start your comment by stating your name for the record. After that, you will have 3 minutes to address the RTA board. At the 2-minute mark, I will politely cut in and request that you wrap up your comments. You may now proceed with your comment.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Carolyn Campbell. I'm Vice Chair of the Citizen Advisory Committee. And I've been honored to serve on that committee for you for over 5 years. Our task was to present you with an RTA next plan, which we were hoping to arrive at by consensus or at least close to unanimity. We had an infusion of new members a little under 2 years ago after there was attrition by a few members then. And so there was a little bit of a reset, a learning curve and orientation, et cetera, et cetera. And so really, it's been for the last almost 2 years that we've been working in earnest and kind of getting to know each other all over again. But there are just a few reasons that you don't have a plan for us, and I will say yet. The first and probably the biggest issue is structural. The open meeting law, the interpretation, I should say, of the open meeting law has prevented us from reviewing any proposed documents, budget, project proposals that have come from the citizens, either before or during our meetings. And I think it's really hampered our back and forth discussions and exchanges. But in June, we had a bit of a breakthrough as we approved a plan for $2.34 billion. However, with a friendly amendment to have the board consider an additional 1/10% sales tax, and the vote was 18-6, I had great hopes that we could refine the budget and keep working. However, because the board declined to consider the tax increase, the entire budget was considered moot, and we were not able to get it was not able to get reviewed by the TMC, giving us technical help. And I think to this, okay, I think to this day, we haven't, you or the TMC hasn't seen it. That's hampered our ability. But as we were working in the last couple of months, we were limited to 4 options, 3 of which had recently been developed by a few members. And I was a part of those discussions. And after consideration, comments we heard from members and jurisdictions, we tried to refine that. But then on Monday, 2 things came up, and it was a thing that also came up yesterday at the TMC, and that was some confusion over what the contingency was being used for. It was the first time we kind of heard it in that manner. And so there was a lot of confusion and it created a little rift, which is one of the issues that we couldn't come to. And then the very final thing was
3 minutes.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, since Ms. Campbell is the vice chair of the CAC, can she finish her thought? Or make sure that she finishes her thoughts when Mr. McGovern is up to talk about the CAC. Whatever you like. She can finish her thought, or she can stay and add her comments when Mr. McGovern.
But point of order, this is an agendized item, and typically a call to audience doesn't speak to an agendized
No,
item.
generally you speak at the item
Right.
itself.
So it actually would be more appropriate,
Right.
if you're going to be open to having her speak at that time for that to happen.
Yeah, we could let her finish at the agenda. Please continue with the next speaker.
Okay, right, it was just on the final level. I think, people,
I think they want you to stay around for the.
oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I'll be
Ms.
back.
Campbell, the chair just decided to have you finish your thought when Mr. McGovern
I'm
comes
sorry.
up
Okay, I missed that.
to talk about the item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker is Miranda Schubert. Thank you, speaker. Please start your comment by stating your name for the record. After that, you'll have 3 minutes to address the RTA board. At the 2-minute mark, I will politely cut in and request that you wrap up your comments. You may now proceed with your comments.
Thank you. My name is Miranda Schubert. Thank you, members of the board. As stalwart advocates for housing and transportation planning policies that prioritize the greater good, Tucson for Everyone has been organizing for the past year in support of increased investment in public transit. Our focus is making local governance more accessible to all community members and bringing in voices that aren't typically heard in these spaces. In October, we initiated a letter writing campaign and contacted our 2,400 plus member listserv to encourage community members to share their perspectives about the RTA Next development plan process so that the CAC could hear community priorities. Over the course of several weeks, 94 people wrote to you and to info@rtamobility.com to share how they would like the CAC to design the RTA plan to invest in public transit. Unfortunately, the CAC never read or saw any of these 94 letters, many of them personalized messages, because they were never transmitted to them. They were also never made aware of the degree of community support across the region for greater investment in safer streets and public transit. We believe this is a dereliction of duty by RTA staff to take their job seriously in managing and sharing important public feedback. And it should concern you, RTA board, that staff has decided which comments to include and which to exclude. You need to have an accurate and complete picture of what the regional community wants from RTA Next. Otherwise, you run the risk of approving a plan that doesn't have the support of the public. And I just want to share a couple excerpts from the public comments that until now haven't been shared with the people who need to hear them most. One of them writes, I have been a dedicated cyclist and public transit user with a 25-year history of riding in Tucson. During this time, I've witnessed some noteworthy improvements in our transportation infrastructure, but the work is far from complete. We have a compelling responsibility to make our streets safe for all and to ensure seamless mobility and connectivity across our region.
Apologize for the interruption. You're at 2 minutes. Please bring your comments to a close.
The streets in the city are dangerous. The sight of ghost bikes at major intersections and streets is in itself a poignant reminder of the lives lost due to crashes. This situation is wholly unacceptable, and it is clear that the road design plays a significant role in creating these dangers. We must address the issue of streets that are dangerous by design. Another community member writes, my son and I are only 3.5 miles from school, 1.5 miles from work, yet I find myself using my car more often than I would like because of the number of potholes in the road that are labeled as bike friendly. As my son grows into a teenager, I would like to let him use his bike to navigate the city without feeling like it is so risky. Having a working public transit system that runs regularly throughout the year and can accommodate bicyclists and teens easily is very important to me. If such a system truly existed, we would not even need a car. And as a working single mom, that would be a relief, as I am always struggling to keep the car working.
Excuse me, Speaker, you're at 3 minutes.
Thank you. I have also emailed my comments to you all, and I hope you take the time to read them and consider these important perspectives. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I want to make a comment on this, and Mayor Wenfield brought this up, and in our council meetings, if somebody wants to speak to a specific item, usually we take the comments on the item and not at general call to the public. That's something that's not on the agenda to somebody. And that might be something that we look at because we do that as well. Mayor Winfield. So item 4.
Mr. Chair, item 3, please.
What, did I miss one?
That's okay. It's, item 3 is the approval of the.
Oh, okay.
minutes.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Now I.
All right, Mr. Chair, item 4 again, is for information only. If you have any questions, be happy to answer your questions.
See any hands? Item 5.
I move to approve.
Do we have to?
There's no action required in item 4.
No action.
All right.
Item 5.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, item 5, similar to the regional council meeting, you have a schedule for the meetings of the RTA board for next year. Similar to the PAG meeting, I request that we change the May meeting to May 30th instead. Otherwise, looking for a motion to approve the schedule.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Both. Carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.
All right, Mr. Chair, we have a handful of IGAs and Rick Ellis is gonna give you a brief about each one of them and then only requires one action for approval.
This is on the word brief. Thank you very much. It's good afternoon. Pleasure to be in front of you for these. As Farhad mentioned, we have a package of IGA documents too. I'll try to summarize how they're grouped together. The first 2 are intergovernmental agreements between the RTA and City of Tucson for the fixed route transit systems, as well as the regional transit systems throughout the area. Our third one is a IGA with Valley Metro up in Phoenix for an existing route. And we're in the position where we're combining several contracts and able to partner with Valley Metro to be able to continue to provide these services. The next bundle are 2 projects associated with the Valencia Road extension from Kolb all the way out to Houghton. So the first one is the intersection improvement project that was completed by the City of Tucson within the recent years. This terminates that final activity on that and allows us to shift the money then to the eastern segment in order to complete that project, which is preparing for upcoming advertisement. So that's why you see 2 agreement documents in front of you. The third is associated with Pima County on the Palo Verde Road, and we'll add the sidewalks out there, necessary pedestrian facilities, as part of a grant award that they won for our Regional Transportation Alternatives Grant, or RTAG. And our last one is the Tangerine Road project as they prepare for upcoming construction activities to start on that. Does the necessary amendment, adjustment of dollars necessary to align with the project team activities, and then increase the amount to cover the most recent construction bid estimate costs associated with their delivery techniques on that. As always, we've worked closely with respective staff, jurisdictions, and team members on this to ensure everything is accurate, matches with what their intent is, and happy to answer any questions, either myself or Rio De Leon, who's our transit administrator.
Any questions? Mayor Winfield.
The Valencia Road, the 2023-013, that's a significant increase in cost. Will that project be able to be completed with the new budget?
So we're bringing that, this is basically authorizing the right of way and construction. So that's why it's done such a big jump on that. Is up until now, we funded only the design activities. Included in this is the provision that the City of Tucson and us work through and have adopted for these type of projects, which is that at the time of bid, once those are received, then we can do any further adjustments either up or down as necessary. So we believe this amount matches the current and latest estimates.
Opposed? Carries unanimously.
Thank you all very much.
Item 7.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this item is kind of overlaps between PAG and RTA, but since RTA provides transit services, it's probably a more appropriate place to provide an update to you. Recently, in partnership with City of Tucson, Suntran, and our staff, we've been working on a comprehensive operational analysis, and Rio will give you an update on that, and that includes all of RTA funded transit services. So before we jump into the comprehensive COA, Rio is going to give you an overview of RTA funded transit operations first, and then we'll dive into the COA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board for taking the time to watch this presentation on the draft service plan for the Comprehensive Operational Analysis, or COA, which is a joint effort conducted by the City of Tucson and PAG RTA to improve transit service throughout the region. This presentation was adapted from the PowerPoint shown to the public earlier in the year and adjusted to highlight the changes to the RTA funded services. I'll walk through the current configuration of RTA funded services and the draft recommendation for those services and share some of the key highlights of the proposed plan. Before we get into the meat, a quick caveat. This is the draft plan. So final recommendations have not been completed at this time. Elements of the presentation are likely to change based on public feedback. So for some background, the RTA holds various IGAs with transit providers like SunTrain and the town of Oro Valley to help improve and expand transit across several dimensions of service. Shown here is the frequency and area expansion map. The focus here is serving new areas and providing 20-minute or better headways between buses during peak hours on our system's most utilized corridors. Here we have the weekend service expansion, which focuses on providing weekend services across the system. This allows riders to better access weekend employment and leisure activities that were previously prohibitively difficult to access on transit during the weekends. Similarly expansive is the weekend evening service expansion, which helps provide trips for those who work in the evening to travel back to their homes. Oh. I think that's record time. Can you take me back to the express services?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Spoilers. Thank you. The express service expansion funds 1 Sun Shuttle and 10 express routes that are intended to provide easy access from suburban park and ride lots to the downtown and University of Arizona employment hubs at peak hours. You may notice Raytheon's campus is also served. However, these routes are not paid for through the RTA. Sun Shuttle's 10 fixed routes are intended to provide traditional bus service to less dense areas where a full 40-foot bus may not make sense. And the 4 general public dial-a-ride areas are designed to provide provide public transit access to communities that are particularly difficult to serve with traditional route and schedule buses. Here you'll see the map of the Sun Shuttle and Sun Van service areas. Sun Van in the center area in teal complements SunTran fixed route as required by the Federal Transit Administration. Sun Shuttle, the lime green on the outside, is the optional area. This goes outside the FTA required area and is served at the discretion of the RTA board. The blue area at the top is a Sun Shuttle operation provided by Oro Valley. Next, I'm going to discuss how these services will be affected by the COA. Oh, that is way too far. Sorry about that, y'all. The aim of this COA is to enhance the transit system to better support the needs of the community and improve the efficiency, effectiveness, and equity of current transit operations. Working within the existing operating budget, the goal is to make service improvements that address community priorities through optimizing the system and increasing efficiency. We started this project with a robust data collection and community engagement effort to understand what's working well within the current system and what needs improvement. That second public outreach period towards the end of the timeline here was particularly illuminating. In early 2023, we conducted an extensive community engagement effort to collect input on transit improvement priorities. We had an online website and survey available between the end of January and mid-April and collected over 500 responses from the community. We held pop-up events at the 3 major transit centers, the University of Arizona, San Javier del Bac Mission, Pima Community College East Campus. We also held virtual public and stakeholder meetings in February.
We're still working through the public comments made at this time, and many of the common comments made by the public are being put into the final report. From that outreach effort, we learned a lot of valuable information that informed the draft service plan. The chart on the slide shows how current riders answered the question asking about the service improvement that was most important to them. 53% of current riders referenced additional service, and of these respondents, 43% requested more frequency, and 10% specifically requested more weekend service. For people who do not currently ride, 37% requested more frequent service, followed by 23% requesting shorter overall travel times. In previous surveys, riders requested longer operating hours, specifically on weekends. In this survey, we wanted to understand which time periods were most important to have longer hours. 60% of respondents said that later weekend evening service between 7 and 10 p.m. is the most important time of the week for longer hours. SunTran currently operates 2 Sun-on-Demand zones that act like an Uber or Lyft service, where riders can request pickups and drop-offs within a specified area. When asked if they prefer traditional fixed route service with set schedules and bus stops, or on-demand services like Sun-on-Demand or Uber and Lyft, 71% said they preferred traditional fixed route service. This split is consistent with feedback collected in other communities as well. Based on the findings from the community outreach, as well as our analysis of the performance of existing services, we developed key strategies for the draft service plan. The targets and improvements for the bus network include realigning or extending routes to provide more direct rides to key destinations with fewer transfers, increasing the number of routes that operate at high frequencies at least every 15 minutes throughout the day, improving access and quality of service for traditionally underserved communities, extending service hours to 11 p.m. on weekdays and 10 p.m. on weekends for many routes, and adding frequency on weekends so transit is more convenient for trips such as shopping and recreation. We now want to walk through just a few of the key route changes. You can view details for all these routes in the individual route recommendations page of the TucsonCOA.com website. First, I'll take you to Route 16 and Route 18, which are running on Oracle and 6th Avenue. These will be combined to create one continuous north-south corridor between Tohono Ta'ai Transit Center and Roy Lau Transit Center. This route would operate every 10 minutes on weekdays between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., becoming the most frequent bus route in the entire system. These routes currently have the highest number of daily transfers between them, and riders would no longer need to transfer downtown at Ronstadt Transit Center. Similarly, routes 12 and 24 would be combined into one continuous north-south corridor along 10th and 12th Avenue without forcing riders to transfer at Roy Lau Transit Center, greatly shortening travel times for riders traveling along this corridor. This route would operate every 20 minutes. Route 11 will extend the Aho Way branch further west to South Cook Street, providing continuous east-west service along Aho Way. With this change, Route 50 would be discontinued, but riders can continuous service along Aho Way without required transfers. Route 29 will extend east past Roy Lau Transit Center along Irvington to Banner University Medical Center. This will provide continuous east-west service along Irvington and new direct connections for residents to Tucson Spectrum, UMC, and additional shopping centers. Route 61 is an RTA-funded service that uses full 40-foot SunTran buses, and the draft plan recommends we use Sun Shuttle vehicles instead due to decreased ridership while the Foothill Mall redevelops. Route 401 and 107X will be combined to provide continuous service to Tohono Ta'ai Transit Center and Ronstadt Transit Center during peak hours, creating an all-day express service that connects Oro Valley and Casas Adobes to more SunTran services. Route 430 will be extended to Casino del Sol, which will establish an easy transfer to 2 other RTA-funded services, routes 27 and 29. This reroute would reduce travel time and increase reliability. Route 430 also currently only operates counterclockwise. Clockwise service will also be added. Route 421X, the Saharita and Green Valley Express service, will be extended to serve Summit and continue on to 6th, serving the VA, South Tucson Municipal Center, and downtown Ronstadt Center. I want to thank you all so much for taking the time to watch this presentation and learn about the draft service plan. We appreciate your feedback and welcome any questions. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mr.
Are
Chair.
there any questions on this issue or comments?
Route 23,
23.
excuse me?
Is that, did I hear 23 correctly?
Was, I guess the question being removed? 23.
At this time, there's no plans to discontinue Route 23, to my knowledge, in the draft service plan.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, that's actually what I was gonna touch on. So we want to make sure that you know about this out there. There's a lot of conversation in the community. The recommendations have not been finalized. So we didn't want you to be surprised if there's any recommendations. So we'll come back to you at that time if there are any recommendations, especially if they're RTA funded routes. Then we want to make sure we have that conversation with the RTA board before anything would be implemented as a change. So we'll make sure that if there's anything related to Route 23 that we'll follow up with you and let you know, but the board will get that update. In addition to that, thank you, Rio. Any questions for Rio? I'm going to keep him here for a minute anyway, but.
What is the amendment to attract additional, to address the shortage of drivers? What does that look like?
There we go. That's, if you don't mind, that's what I was gonna lead into that conversation. Please stay and help with any questions. So we really wanted to talk a little bit more kind of what services we provide, who provides the services. So currently, as you know, we have a contract with a private contractor who provides services for us. And then we also have IGAs with Sunvan and Suntran, and they also support a lot of these services. The contract we have currently, and I sent out a couple of memos on this recently, they went through some changes recently, and as a result of that, we had multiple discussions and multiple meetings about what can they do to address shortages of drivers. And they're doing their best. They're trying to hire more drivers. Everybody's dealing with that same situation. So as part of that conversation, we are encouraging them to use Uber and Lyft more to meet their peak demand. And they're doing that. And Rio can tell you that their performance has improved quite a bit. The trend is really good. There was a dip in the trend, but now they're really performing well, especially with the new management. I think they're putting really good efforts in improving the performance. But at the same time, what I would like to have that conversation with you is to authorize us to explore a potential amendment to that contract to allow them to bring in a subcontractor as needed. And I would have to work with our attorney to make sure that we can accommodate that amendment to the contract. But I want to make sure that I have your authorization to at least explore that option as a backup. That's the main reason for that. And again, Rio can tell you he's working closely with the contractor. We're really happy with the new management. They are doing the right things, but it's going to take some time. And we want to have a backup plan for them as needed so they can meet that peak demand.
So the ask is just, sorry, Mr. Chair. So the ask is just to explore the option, and then it would come back to us.
Exactly. Authorize us to explore the option. Currently, we have a contract and we're really, they have some limitations. So with your authorization, we can explore that and then come back with an amendment at a later time if we choose. That's the backup option for meeting the peak demand.
Sure. And Mr. Mogini, just to clarify, this is for the provider who's providing paratransit services.
Correct. They offer fixed routes as well as paratransit. Fixed route performance is doing really well. Paratransit is where they need some support for that backup peak demand. Yes.
How are they doing? Because they have monthly standards that they have to meet. How are they doing with the meeting of those standards?
So as I mentioned, we've been tracking, they've been doing real well for a while, but then they dipped down because of the management change. And we've been working with them, trying to make sure that they bring it back up. And within the last month, they've been meeting that standards again. So that change in management was really challenging for them. Again, at the same time, not having enough drivers, even their customer service department was understaffed. So between the two, they really had to struggle to bring the service back up together with the new management. So there was a dip in service during that time.
So Jim, if I could continue, Mr. Chair, so the amendment to the contract to require them to use a third-party provider, that would not be an option for them. That would be us telling them, in order to meet all of the standards, you have to make use of this third-party provider.
Correct. That's what I'm suggesting. Authorize me to explore that option, make sure legally we can put that out, add that as a requirement into the contract, and then to do so at potentially the next meeting.
And do you need a formal motion?
Just again, it's up to you all, a direction, or just so you know that I'm working on it and I'll be back next time.
Mr. Chair, thanks. So for clarification, then, is the amendment not necessarily addressing the shortage of drivers? In other words, like fixed routes, paratransit, we're having challenges filling driver positions.
Yeah.
So is this going to be looking at that in terms of looking at perhaps wages or incentives?
Mr. Chair, Mayor Winfield, all of the above. So they're currently doing that. They're trying to make sure that they're competitive. They're recruiting more drivers. They're looking for 20 drivers currently. And
both fixed and
paratransit, yes, and paratransit.
Not just a paratransit.
Exactly, it's both, but we're doing much better on the fixed route services. On the paratransit side, again, the demand has increased. It's actually demand in fixed route is going down, demand in paratransit's going up. So that's where the need is. So again, to make sure you're clear on what they're doing, they're doing everything they can. But what I'm suggesting is that if they can't get to that point, then bringing in another subcontractor with resources would be the solution.
Just to your previous comment, with fixed route going down and paratransit going up, is there a requirement that we that a paratransit rider is a paratransit rider, or could there be potential abuses?
Yeah, could you go back to that map that shows the areas, please?
The convenience.
So, and this might be a conversation at a different time on the service areas, and we touched on there are areas that are required. There are areas that are required because we have a fixed route, and if we have a fixed route, we're required to provide the complementary paratransit as well. So those areas are required, and then we have areas that are outside that are optional. And by definition, the areas on the outside are the areas that are seeing some of that demand. So the kind of a lighter green color, the area in the blue, Oro Valley is providing those services. But the areas in the green, the lighter green, that's where RTA board established those optional areas. And that's where the demand is high and resources are not able to keep up with that demand, but those are optional. And we use the same process as Suntran to make sure that folks are eligible for those services. They actually go through Suntran for the eligibility. But the demand is high and it's going to continue to go up.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mogimi, you and I spoke prior to the meeting about this map and some of the interjurisdictional issues that passengers often confront. We also had a conversation about the online service that riders have to use and some of the challenges they've had with that. How will we be addressing those issues moving forward to make the system more user friendly?
Yeah, I'd love to. From an operational perspective, Rio and his team and the new management team that came in, they're working on that on a regular basis. So on the platform itself, they recognize and acknowledge that the platform that they're using is really more useful for fixed route services. So they're trying to modify the platform to support paratransit door-to-door services, and that's ongoing. Rio, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, certainly. So the good thing is that we have a great team in place at National Express who are all really committed. I want to highlight Jesse Story's efforts, especially the call center manager. He's been really imperative, as well as Charlotte Robinson, the general manager, making sure that the friction between the rider and our call center has been lessened. And so we're operationally working on every fix that we can get our hands on when we get our hands on it. And that includes things like digital applications and improving our call center experience. And so I really want to highlight those pieces to this body. Thank you.
Thank you, Rio. And then the second part to your question, that's an operational as well. And we appreciate our partners that provide services in other areas. Again, that's ongoing discussion with Oro Valley, SunTrans, SunVan. So if there's a passenger in Green Valley and they want to go and stop in Sahuarita and then go all the way up to Oro Valley, that we'll plan a return as well. And I think that's kind of what you're referring to, is that when they cross these service areas, sometimes they have challenges if they don't schedule it ahead of time. So if somebody has used SunVan and now they're in Oro Valley and they want to get back to the city, there's got to be operational agreements, almost like a mutual aid agreements between these different providers, that regardless of where you're coming from, where you're going, you're going to receive that service, and then we'll all figure out who's going to pay for what.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, in terms of the modifications to the platform to assist with paratransit ridership and the effort to try and get more drivers, perhaps using the third-party provider, everything that we've talked about, when would we get another update on all of these measures?
Well, hopefully at the next meeting, if we have the amendment to the contract, then we'll provide an update at that meeting as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other comments?
Again, it's up to you. It's at your pleasure, but
I was gonna say,
I am pursuing a potential amendment to the contract, but that's at your pleasure if you want to formalize that. If not, I'll bring it back to you at the next meeting.
Anybody think we need to formalize that? If not, we'll just move forward. Item 8.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity to work on this effort. As you all know, this is a significant effort, very important to the region, to all the partners. I really want to acknowledge and thank our CAC members as well as the officers. And I didn't want to say anything earlier, Carolyn, but you're on the agenda as a CAC officer to speak under this agenda. You're more than welcome to speak under this agenda. So again, quick update from the last meeting. We had just kind of an overview first, and then I really want to dive in and talk about what's in front of you today. So if you recall back at the July board meeting, the board directed CAC and TMC to collaborate together and come back, and the deadline was this week to be able to bring a plan to you as a draft RTA next plan. And they've worked really hard. Again, I can't thank the officers and all the members, both TMC and the CAC. Really good efforts on everyone's part. I think that sense of urgency was evident, especially this last 2 meetings. There was a draft plan, and both, I'm going to ask Mr. McGovern to touch on that as well. There was a draft plan that was floating around in that July timeframe, and Mr. Brian Keeley, one of the CAC members, really showed a lot of initiative by providing a modification to that plan, brought that forward, and through CAC meetings and ad hoc working group meetings, There were more modifications made to that plan again by Mr. McGovern. So finally, the two groups really were able to start converging. And I honestly believe that the two plans that you have in front of you is a good mix of everything that's been discussed. And Mr. McGovern did his best on Monday after almost 5.5 hours to see if they can get to one plan. You kind of have a summary of the actions that were taken at that meeting. And I think at the end of the meeting, Mr. McGovern recognized and acknowledged that it might be best to forward both of the plans. Both were approved by the CAC. Obviously, they're with differences between the two. And then Wednesday, we took both those plans to the TMC. TMC also, lots of effort, especially from our liaison, Mr. DeBonis and Terry. They attended both these meetings. We're talking about 5-hour meetings, almost back to back. And essentially, the recommendation from the TMC at the end of the day was not to forward anything to you and really allow the board to have a conversation about the two plans that are coming forward from the CAC. You have the information in the packet. I can get into the details if you like, but before I do that, I want to allow Mr. McGovern, Ms. Campbell, or our liaisons, Carmine or Terry, to comment if anybody likes to go first.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Happy to see you again. And I thought before I talk at all about the individual plans that Mr. Mogimi just referenced and that you have in your packets, that I would go back to your last meeting and remind you that I told you at the time that there were a couple of major areas that we were going to be immediately focusing on. The first one was going to be transit funding. We've had some great lead up to that. As you see, the robustness of the transit services that are available throughout the RTA region, but also what you perhaps didn't hear but probably know is that there have been projections of kind of the long-term needs or wants and needs of transit totaling, more than double what RTA funding can possibly provide. So there's a lot of options, I guess, none of which will get us all the way to the kind of transit service, perhaps that would be considered the most complete within our region. But we did go beyond the starting point. If you recall the framework which you provided us at the beginning of our work, there was an idea of $510 million overall as far as transit funding within the $2.34 billion overall budget. That was about 22% of the overall budget. And since that time, a group of our members, a 5-person group, came up with an option which would have increased that to about 29%, which is the option 5.1 that you see in your packet, in an attempt to reach a compromise of sorts between those two quite different funding sources. Option 4.2 was brought forward, further modified, and eventually landed at 610 million up to about 26% of the overall budget. Just so you have kind of round numbers about where we are. 22 to 29, the 26 being a little more than halfway between, if you will. And for a comparison to RTA 1, RTA 1 was established with a close to 25% goal. Obviously, with the reduction in overall revenues, my closest guess at this point is that'll be in the low 20s somewhere, perhaps 21. So just to kind of give you a flavor of the differences and the things that we were trying to land on as far as a compromise, a single plan to bring to you. Obviously, that's a sticking point and a difference between those two plans. The other area that we were focused on was the corridor projects, the naming of those major regional corridors. And your budget, that I say your budget, our budget from the very beginning had been $1.12 billion for those. And at the time, we thought that would cover 33 or so projects. Once we received very detailed and up-to-date cost estimates that reflected the tremendous amount of construction inflation that has occurred in the last several years, we realized that we were really going to be unable to deliver that many. And so regardless of where we ended up, even whether we had been able to deliver a 0.6 of a cent proposal to you that would have been acceptable, we were going to have to make some tough choices about projects. So we've spent a lot of time doing that. And each of these options that you have, both of the options here and the other two that made it to Monday's marathon meeting and were voted upon, recognize that some reduction in the amount of projects is absolutely necessary. So from the 1.12 billion, in order to actually take care of this previous focus area of transit, meant that we had a push-pull of the attempt to reach a consensus. And in both cases, both that you see there, you have essentially the same budget for roadway projects for corridors, and it's about almost $1 billion, 995 plus minus million dollars, which is approximately 10% reduction, if you will, in the budget that we started with for corridor projects. I wanted to set that stage just so you'd have an idea of kind of where the major differences were known to be at the time and continue to be, and in fact made it to your desks still as the major points of difference. I will say that we also sent you several position statements or recommendations about the things that kind of drove our proposal, and which we want you to keep in mind that were important to the committee and that reflect some of the issues we think that still need to be dealt with, or perhaps may become issues that the board wants to take up. In order to reach a single plan that we can take to the public, unless for some reason you would decide that you wanted to send two plans there, which I would not be recommending, certainly. I think that there's a couple of primary areas that should be addressed. First, but in no particular order, the naming of categorical projects. One of the recommendations that we're making is that in order to engender more support and more integrity perhaps to our promises of delivery of categorical elements of the plan, that some projects should be actually named within the categorical elements. I know that the city of Tucson has provided us with a short list of, long list actually, of such potentially named projects, and other jurisdictions are working on those. But that certainly was not available for us at this time, and so it doesn't come forward to you except with the recommendation that it be pursued from this point on. Additionally, regarding the sub-elements, you just have the element totals before you. Those sub-element breakdowns are very important, obviously, and become a part of the promise to the voters and exactly what is shown to the voters in the on their ballots. So obviously very important. The two the two proposals you have had previous vetting of potential sub-element breakdown, but no finalization of those at this time. Additionally, one of the things that came out of the detailed and lengthy meeting that the Technical Management Committee held yesterday was a series of potential project changes. These are projects that either had been left off and should be, that there was support for adding back in, projects that may be removed and instead handled elsewhere within the plan. And then specific project budget changes that obviously, since it came yesterday, much of that came yesterday and still is yet to be decided among some of the elected bodies. Prevented us, I guess, from actually providing that kind of detail to you. However, those are all very positive changes, I think, that really strengthen the plans, either plan. And I think it's something that you'll want to make sure that that we or TMC or yourselves reflect in the further vetting of the plans, and certainly in deciding whether there is a compromise plan between the two that makes sense to you. Additionally, the city of Tucson has provided us a new prioritization process, their holistic view of transportation and prioritizing certain elements of their overall transportation plan. And we've attempted to utilize those priorities in developing this plan, but further work from the city's side in both evaluating the coverage, which is provided in these two documents or these two proposals. That is to make sure that the wards are adequately covered, that the areas of the community and the needs of the community are adequately served. Remember, we started with 108 projects, got down to 33, and then got the bad news that we could only probably get 2/3 of those projects funded. And so that final look at all of the elements that were part of our guiding principles to ensure that these two or any compromise plan actually are in keeping with those principles and your own needs is yet to be done. And finally, it was mentioned recently or a little bit earlier about the contingencies. So contingencies for both economic changes, let's say, between now and 2046, as well as overlap contingency, have been perhaps not completely vetted in these plans. So that will be something that I think the board will want to provide more direction on and evaluate when you look at the two different proposals. I'm happy to have presented these two plans to you. I regret that we didn't find a single plan to bring to you, but I'm confident that such a plan does exist. I have no doubt really that ultimately a very solid plan can grow from a choice of either of these proposals, whole cloth, or my personal preference would be, and I think in order to achieve maximum consensus, if you will, a compromise plan, I think is also very doable. So I'll leave it at that and ask if maybe Carolyn would like to complete her comments, if that's okay, unless the board would like something.
Please do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. And I'm sorry, it's kind of sounded like I was being negative earlier. I was just trying to get like the context of how I feel about these two plans that unfortunately we sent both to you, but and how I think there were some stumbling blocks along the way, and especially some new information, you know, just even yesterday at the TMC and certainly on Monday at our meeting. And I think I'm just kind of exhausted. It's been a long week. But anyway, so Tom went over it pretty well, but I kind of wanted to boil it down to, and I don't know how much you've been able to really look at these, the plans in a general way, because it's all kind of new since Monday and then since yesterday. But what I was starting to say is the contingency issue was really both the TMC and the CAC was kind of finally explained in a way that everybody, I think at least at the TMC, understood it as far as the gap between the two plans. But I don't think we really had that kind of a discussion, or maybe time for that discussion at the CAC. So people were confused, and we fell into a non-contingency and contingency kind of category. And so that was one of the big things. The other one was trying to make sure that all of the jurisdictions really were going to be supportive of it, which I think is all of our goals, particularly sensitive to the city of Tucson, who I've been watching at both of the committee meetings and the RTA board, as well as the mayor and council, and wanting to really address some of the issues they have. Again, this was like pretty late information that some of the priorities had changed, and trying to plug those in, which I still think we can do. The other was a Marana project that at one of the last TMC meetings, there was an offer or a statement, like in the sense of compromise, that we could take Ida Road off the map. And that, we'd never gotten the official word that was different. So I found that out yesterday at the TMC meeting. And really then there's just the differences between the categoricals and some of the named projects in the different categoricals. Again, we got new information from the county on Monday that they had also developed a list similar to how the city went through that. So a lot of things have been kind of changing just in the last couple of days. And then there was the confirmation from the city of South Tucson that they were no longer interested in that one big project, would like to have monies to fund a lot of smaller projects, kind of like the city has offered. So, you know, and all that. And then the policy considerations have been a big part of what we have been talking about. But we did have a unanimous vote on that on Monday. But then the TMC, we were hoping to get some feedback from them, but that kind of ran out of time on that one as well, especially since they weren't making a recommendation to you. So really what I guess my point is I don't think we're that far apart. We just weren't done. So we didn't have all the information, and I hate to say that at this hour, but really what I'm here to hopefully get across to you is that I really don't think that, and I don't know what you all are planning on doing, but any compromise plan, I don't think it's advisable to send a plan to the voters that wasn't really, the plan didn't come from the citizens committee that has been working on this. I think it's going to make a big difference to the public. So whether we have a way of coming up with a plan between the two committees, I mean, the jurisdictions have been really wonderful in working on some of these, you know, the project delineations, taking out projects, the you know, cost estimates and such. But I think it would be advisable to, before this goes out, to have a stamp of approval and hopefully a consensus or a close to unanimous. And I really want to say, so I'm more optimistic than others that I've heard in the last couple of days, but I really am. And I reminded the chair that 20 years ago, we got out of our last CAC meeting at 11:30 at night, which even in 2006 was way past my bedtime, but we did it. But, you know, finally, I just want to say the entire membership of our committee has been working in good faith for the whole time, a very professional manner. We've been passionate. People have their different, you know, opinions about, I think the people that don't take the bus have come to understand that it's really important for people in the community and for the future of our planet. And then others that would like never to see any more roads, you know, understand that we're going to need some of that too. So, you know, I am willing to work with members. You know, I was involved in discussions on both of the plans that you see before you. And I think that, you know, we've all been developing an understanding and appreciation and trust of each other's motives and all that. So I would hope that in order to get approval, we have something that we can make sure that every jurisdiction is happy or at least fine with it. And that, you know, this comes from that citizens committee and isn't, you know, put out to the voters by somebody that said the CAC got us almost there and we had to finish it ourselves. I don't think that's the idea. So we're still willing to help. So anyway, thank you. And I really don't have anything else to add than what Chair McGovern said.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if the liaisons would like to add anything, I know Carmine and Terry.
Good afternoon, board members. Carmine DeBonis. Just wanted to add that I was at the CAC committee meeting on Monday and participated in the TMC meeting yesterday and wanted to just acknowledge all the work that's been done by the members on both of those committees. Just a fabulous effort to try and get to a single plan. And I appreciate the efforts that Carolyn Campbell and Chair McGovern put forward, as well as all of the CAC committee meeting members. And didn't have anything substantively to add. I'm available to answer questions if they come up. The TMC yesterday looked at both of the plans that have been advanced to you. There was a lot of discussion for our meeting discussing both of those plans. In the end, it was decided not to make a recommendation on either of those and let them come to you for your discussion today. Again, happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
Carmine, thank you. It's a question for you on part of the thought process about not making a recommendation. And I actually think that's probably the right thing for the TMC to do, since you're the technical advisory or the technical management folks around that. Was there anything in either plan that you saw made it unviable?
So I think the subject of contingency took up quite a bit of the discussion at TMC, and as has been stated, the realization that there is a plan overlap funding need as well as an economic uncertainty contingency. So that was discussed for a good portion, almost half of the meeting or nearly half of the meeting at TMC yesterday. The other thing that left the committee not feeling comfortable making a recommendation of one or the other was the lack of specificity that we were able to discuss at the subcategorical level. So what we had was the table that you have in your packet today that gives the macro funding levels at each of the categorical elements, but we felt that there really needed to be the opportunity to discuss the subcategorical structure and the funding amounts at those levels. So I would characterize those as probably being primarily the two reasons why the TMC didn't land on forwarding you a recommendation of one option over the other.
And I appreciate it. Again, I think that for the role defined by the structure of these two committees, that really was the role that you should have taken in this case. Obviously, as the board or however we decide to move forward, come into a compromise solution, or what the plan will be going forward, then obviously the TMC still got that technical management side of it involved in that case. So I just wanted to make sure there was nothing any more than you didn't feel comfortable recommending one of the two at this time. And that's kind of what it took for you. So thank you very much.
Wow.
Mr.
Let's start the 4-hour discussion. And I'm going to start.
Oh, you go ahead.
I'm the chairman.
Yes, you are.
You know, I've done a lot of thoughts and prayers, believe me, on what we're doing here. And we're kind of at a spot in the road where we've got to make some decisions. And I'm going to give you some of my thoughts and decisions, and I would hope each person on this board can do the same thing. One on contingency. I, along with Carolyn Campbell, was involved in the first RTA. That RTA came $500 million short, 25% over the 20 years. We took $300 million from PAG, which I don't want to do again, because there's other things in all of our communities we could do with that money, and still came up 200 short. A couple city projects, a county project, and a Marant project that we had to push on to RTA next. So I think contingency is really important. A lot of people talk about there's contingency in every project, and that's correct. But what happens there is asphalt goes up 10%. So you use up that contingency, or you find a wastewater line or something that wasn't noticed before and you have to change it, and it takes part of that contingency. I don't think 100 million is enough, but I'm willing to compromise on some of this stuff because we're going to hit recessions and we're going to hit bumps in the road over the next 20 years. I kind of looked at the two plans, and I'm speaking very openly and honestly. 5.1, I could not sell to the people of Marana, Haver Valley, and Pitcher. I just can't. 4.2 is not my favorite plan in the world, but it's something I could live with a few tweaks. I think that we have to look at everybody getting projects and how regional the projects are. I know our three projects, just for our community, Cortero and Tangerine. Tangerine will be as much benefit to Oro Valley as us, and probably northern Pima County as well. Cortero benefits everybody, the city, the county, us, everyone. If we do those projects, they're very regional. And even Ina Road, we had said that we could do some different things with Ina Road and still get the 3 lanes, but we still need a big portion of that money, which we'd be willing to work with. But I think we're kind of at a point, you know, if I have to try to sell, Mayor Romero and I have had personal conversations on some of these things, is what do I need and what do you need? And I'm talking about our communities. Miranda doesn't need transit. We're 126 square miles and 60,000 people. It doesn't really work except for our urbanized areas right up against the city. And for me to sell people on spending $700 million on transit, I just can't do it. I really can't. I think 4.2 could work. I think it gets, Or Valley gets 2 projects, Sarita gets 2 projects, kind of gets 5 or 7.
I think it's, 6.
6. Okay, I went right around it. Okay, 6. Miranda would get 3. And all of our projects, even our projects, are very regional. I can guarantee you, city and county people use Ina Road like it's going out of style. And we built that great new interchange. We just need to move people on both sides of the interchange, you know, is what we're trying to do. I hope we can move this plan forward. I really do. But I think we need to get somewhere in the middle before we do move. Next.
Well, since you asked, I agree with Ms. Campbell and I disagree probably on the same point, because my feeling is that we did, I wouldn't say it was a consensus plan, but the CAC did bring us 2 plans to us. So I appreciate that, but then I think, because my ultimate goal is to get something not perfect, as I talked to Supervisor Scott earlier, out of here, it's to get something workable that we can get to the people. Because if it's not the people's plan that is going to be voting for it, it doesn't matter what the 9 of us, I would say, think about it. I'm probably, and we haven't discussed this, but I'm closer to 4.2 as well, because I think in not only our community, but I think of the unincorporated areas down in my area, that heavy city transit is probably not going to be a sell, you know, down in the outlying areas. But I also would say, when I think of 4.2, I also think of it as a starting point. I did want to ask Carmine, because I know you didn't have a recommendation, but hadn't previously the TMC came up with something that probably would be closer to 4.2, because the TMC a few months ago or a couple months ago did take a position, did they not? In the working group, I'm sorry, TMC in the working group.
Well, thank you, Mayor. And in terms of the discussion yesterday on 5.1 and 4.2, we had general discussion in an attempt to move that committee to a recommendation to this body. There was a recommendation or a motion made starting with 4.2 and making some modifications to that. As that conversation went on, it became apparent that we were likely headed for a split vote on that particular recommendation. And ultimately, then the motion was withdrawn to allow for further discussion and other options to be suggested. So there was discussion around 4.2, but solely as a starting point to try and move something forward to get to a single plan recommendation. It could have easily started with 5.1 and taken on the same context of discussion, but I think the outcome likely would have been the same, that the lack of specificity for us to delve into yesterday at the subcategorical and at the individual project level, because of the various interests of the individual jurisdictions, we would not likely have come to you today with a significant majority motion to offer one of those plans over the other.
Right, and I appreciate that effort, because I really think at the end of the day, it's up to us to hopefully work out something that we can send to the voters. And thanks for bringing it up again, because I did have it written down about the categoricals. You know, as the name projects dwindle a little, personally, I'm comfortable with dipping into some of those categorical areas to have some specificity for the voters. But I also think 20 years is a long time, and to have some flexibility built in as well, and not have them all locked in. I agree on the contingency. I don't know what's not going to happen or changes over the 20 years, but I appreciated the CAC bringing at least 2 of those versions forward, but reviewing them certainly as a starting point. I think for me, and it's not me, it's the community and our unincorporated areas that I'm familiar with, probably I'd be more comfortable starting with 4.2 and then having discussion and putting eventually something out on the road shows, because it may end up closer to 5.1 after we go out to the community or not. But you know, to me, it's trying to get it to the voters. Thank you.
Mayor Whitfield.
You know, for the town of Oro Valley, I think we share Mayor Honey's, we have concerns with both plans, 4.2, 5.1. Our preference, we lean towards 4.2 for some of the reasons that each of you stated, so I won't reiterate that, other than we believe the contingency is important. But for the purposes of getting the conversation started, we lean towards 4.2. As I understand, I want to acknowledge the county offered 2 amendments to named corridor projects to reduce the costs associated with those that will go to other projects. So just acknowledge the county's flexibility in those regards. 4.2 is our preference at this stage, and we'll see what it looks like as time goes on.
Thank you. My notes are up here because I don't write them down, you know, but because of this, one thing I didn't state about the categoricals, you know, if we take maybe 10, 15, 20% and apply names to them, the thing I'm worried about is we don't have any flexibility as we move forward. For Mayor Diaz, if he's willing to give up 57 million, I think was originally, and go to 35, allowing Mayor Diaz to put categorical names on a couple smaller projects is completely fair to South Tucson. You know, and I think we do that kind of stuff. So I don't have a problem with naming, but if we name them all, they might as well be in the capital program and not even be in those projects, you know. So, Mayor, you're next.
Thank you so much. I tend to agree with Mr. Maxwell regarding the TMC acted appropriately in not supporting any of the plans because in my mind, there lacks specificity. And I agree with the statement made by Ms. Campbell that the CAC as a Citizens Advisory Committee is really representative of the community and the voters. And so in the notes that were shared with us in terms of the summary of the CAC TMC, Plan 4.2 received 12 yes votes and 8 no votes. Plan 5.1 received 13 yes votes, 6 no votes, and 1 abstention, which I think means no. So very, very close, but I think that there's a desire by the CAC to see option 5.1 in terms of the investment in transit at least considered by the TMC in terms of technicality. And Mr. Chair, you and I have talked about our different needs, right? And what I have heard loud and clear by the residents of Tucson is that they want to see continued investment in transit. And so I think we have to find a way to come to a hybrid solution from 4.2 to 5.1 that will get our voters on board, and that we all can go back and sell to our communities, and that we can show the return on investment, right? Because for the residents of the city of Tucson, we understand that if we were to go at it alone, we could generate so much funds in 20 years. And so what would we do as the city of Tucson if we were to go at it alone? And the list of priorities that the mayor and council submitted to all of my colleagues and invited my colleagues to do something similar is basically the priorities that we feel, based on the input from Tucsonans, that they would feel it would be beneficial and a good return on investment for them as a community, as residents of the city of Tucson that are putting money on the table and expecting something in return. And so, you know, I want to be able to continue sitting here and trying to find a solution to work as a region together to find solutions for our transit and transportation needs. I really am. I would have left this table in this space a long time ago if I didn't really had the intention to act regionally. But acting regionally does not mean that I am going to forego the interests of the residents and taxpayers of the city of Tucson. So I would like to really ask the TMC to possibly use the two proposals and say, hey, what can we put together? What type of hybrid solution can we find that we can present not only to the RTA board, but to the community, that all of us can go back to our voters and say, this is a good plan. This will serve everyone's needs within the next 20 years. So adding specificity to the categoricals is going to, I think, help us get to that place. Because the proposals, if you look at them, the proposals don't present us the $2.3 billion that we're supposed to take out to the community. It presents us, I believe, 4.2 presents us a $1.48 billion plan, and 5.1 presents us a $1.48 billion plan. And so there's still that gap between those numbers and 2.34, which is what we believe a 20-year half-cent sales tax will generate. So there's a lot of conversation to be had. The meeting for CAC just happened on Monday. The meeting for TMC just happened yesterday. Too many questions up in the air. And, you know, I've said it before, we've got to be able to show, when I say we, mayor and council of the city of Tucson, have to be able to show our voters the return on investment based on the priorities that they have told us they want to see investment in. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Supervisor Scott. Then General Maxwell.
Go ahead, John. Either way, Rex.
Well, you guys can fight it out.
I'll just slip into it. Mayor, I think you misunderstood my comment about the TMC. What I didn't want the TMC was to pick between one of the two, because that's the job of this board.
Right.
That's the job of us, is to try to come up with the final solution. So I was actually appreciative that what they did do is they said, they don't have the time and information. And if you look at the construct, the role of the CAC and the TMC, the TMC's not the one that's supposed to deliver the plan. That's the CAC. And having said that, I'm just on the front. I know we're not going to solve it today. We've got a lot of work to do. I'm kind of in between. I like both these options. I think there's pros and cons to both. And I do think we need to come together and have those conversations, have some negotiation. I hope somebody, we figure out a way to do that. But ultimately, I do believe it's going to be our responsibility because there are going to be issues. And I think that was evident in the CAC where they couldn't get to that consensus because there's just folks dug in on each side. They are. And that's good. That's not a bad thing. They're passionate about it. They believe in it. They believe what the future should be. So that being said, I want to take an opportunity to thank the chairs, particularly Tom McGovern, Carolyn Campbell, and Mary Barris for guiding them through this. It is not easy. I was part of that under your leadership that 5 years ago before I just step aside. Think about that. These folks have been working for 5 years. 5 years. Difficult discussions, passionate debate would be an understatement. There are commitments that those folks have on theirs towards their belief of what the future of transportation in this region should look like. And I don't want them to have to knock or compromise. The conversation's great. And what you've done by delivering to us, the fact that the chairs and the team as a whole were able to come up with two plans that Mary pointed out, 12 votes for one, 13 for the other, realize that's a passing majority for either plan. They both had more than 50%. So there are some folks that could have gotten behind either plan. You had others that were not willing to come off their pattern. So I think that's incredible. And I'm hoping that all the members of the CAC continue to remain engaged as individuals throughout the process. We still have call the audience that's going to go on by we as a board decide what's the plan we're going to send to the citizens and the community for the outreach. That community outreach is going to be extensive. I think we've forgotten how long that lasts, how much work PAG puts into setting up, and how many people we're going to hear from that like or don't like our plan. And we will be changing that plan before it goes to the voters. So I hope they all stump. And eventually I hope that every single one of the CAC members becomes a champion of the final thing. That said, I'm going to make a motion, and I'd like to move that the executive director craft a proclamation from the board thanking the members of the Citizens Advisory Committee for the service and time dedicated to the creation of RTA Next. Furthermore, with the delivery of two viable options that will be the structure for the final plan to the board, their service is complete. And the CAC and its members are relieved of any further obligation. They've spent 5 years getting where we are. And if you look at those two plans, Mayor, to your point, to the things, they're incredibly close. It's the responsibility, I believe, of this board with the TMC in some form, providing that technical management expertise to now put something there that we can put in front of the voters. That's the reason for my motion.
I'll second that.
Well, we have a motion.
I seconded it.
Who did?
Tom Murphy.
I would ask for a roll call vote on the motion.
Actually,
Is there any
there's
more
discussion.
Anybody else wish to speak?
Yeah, there's discussion. I think Supervisor Scott wanted to.
No, not to this motion, but when we get back to the item. Thank you, Mayor Romero.
Chair, is it possible to hear from Mr. McGovern and
Carolyn Campbell,
their thoughts about that motion?
And I do have I wouldn't want to support a motion that completely disconnects the CAC from this process.
I fully agree with you. The intent was that's why the comments about individuals participating as we go forward, however you want to do it. If I would be open to accept a friendly amendment that asks whatever we come up with on getting this, that the chairs remain the CAC chairs. Because I think as you talk through them, and they can tell me if I'm wrong, I think they understand the pulse of what the citizens advisories and the citizens work. And it took yeoman's work on the part of these, the chairs to get them where they've gotten them. So if there's an
I would like to do a
friendly
friendly amendment then, if you'd like to accept it. I'd like to do a friendly amendment that we keep the chairs of the CAC as part of deliberations through the TMC and through the process that comes back to RTA board.
Mayor Romero, I'll gladly accept that amendment. I will as well.
Mr. McGovern, did you want to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that works. I just would let you know that my intention in serving in that sort of supportive role for you would be to remain in contact with my members. There's feedback from them that is incredibly important. And while I don't mind being the spokesperson, we go beyond this point. I'm not necessarily their spokesperson unless I can continue to maintain some connection to them and some of the feedback I think that would be necessary. But as far as being willing to continue to help in this, I'm more than happy to do that.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
And then I did want to ask Mr. Chair if we want the representative of the TMC and just ask if the chair of the TMC, Mr. Ortega, wanted to add anything to the meeting, yesterday's meeting.
More than welcome, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. One thing, if you are okay, that I did want to mention, because you have citizen movement, the People's Plan, when it was kind of doled out to the leadership. That's the sense I get as far as, like the mayor was talking about going to the voters and having all that support behind from a fully engaged committee. So, but thank you.
Thank you. Did you have more to comment?
Yeah.
Please.
I don't support the motion. I have to admit, it takes me by surprise. I can only imagine if I was on the CAC or for that matter, the TMC. I think it's abrupt. I think we're incredibly close to letting these two groups come together with one plan. And I mean, that's the impression that I'm getting, that we're not far apart. We're getting closer and closer. So it just seems, not appropriate, and I don't support this.
Supervisor.
Mr. Chair, I want to say to my friend, Mayor Winfield, I very much understand the sentiments that you just expressed. And I have a motion to make when we get back to the regular item that I think will very much address your concerns. But I do support General Maxwell's motion as it was amended by Mayor Romero.
Okay, kind of what we're going to do here is General Maxwell made a motion, seconded by Mayor Murphy, amended by Mayor Romero. Basically, we would dissolve the CAC committee. However, the chairman, the leadership of that committee could still talk to people, but not in a formal manner of sending anything else forward, and that we could move forward. I will say, and I will get you, Mayor Romero, it's getting to the point the 9 people, or generally there's 8 of us that sit around this table, are going to make the decisions. And it's pretty hard for us to make a decision if we have people all over the place making comments. So I support the general's motion as well, but council member or council member. I'm at a council meeting. Mayor Romero.
I'll give the space for Ted so that he can clarify. It looks like you want to clarify something.
Well, one, I want to tell Mayor Winfield, I'm sorry that you found it abrupt but that's just open meeting law issues. And we can't talk outside of this forum. And you know that more than I do. You know that way better than I do. So I don't mean to be disrespectful, but that's why we are so close. I agree. And I apologize for the use of the word camps, but I can tell you based on the emails that we receive all the times, there are camps in this community that are in the 2 different areas, as you know, and And they've done a great job. And what I've really appreciated by people who have been letter writing to us, it's not just a canned form letter. They actually put their feelings in it. So I appreciate that. That tells me a lot. We are so close right now, and we are running out of time. And that's one of the reasons I think these plans are really similar. I mean, if you look at the dollars, it's not that significant when you see the change. And that's why I think for us, I think it's our responsibility to get it. I can guarantee you if Mary and Carolyn and Tom stay active with the TNC or however we go forward and trying to decide this, the voices that are heard at that meeting are going to be there, because I would never disregard it, because they put, like I said, many of those folks 5 years. But I know it's long and it's time, and we're running out of time. And if we don't make a movement, I don't want to be like Maricopa's and they're up against it. They've got one shot at it, either passes or they fails and they lose the money. And we've got to get something out to the citizens at large, just not the advisory committee. Just my opinion. So I wanted to clarify why I made that.
I'm gonna call the question.
I still
The
had
chairman.
discussion points. Chairman.
I'll always let you speak.
Thank
You know-
you, Mayor. Thank you. You know, I agree that we're very, very close. I still don't see it, you know, all of the priorities that the City of Tucson Mayor and Council had forwarded in terms of there's lack of maintenance of our RTA 1 projects, which would include, you know, pavement preservation. And I believe that between option 4.2 and option 5.1, you know, there is $100 million contingency. Well, both actually, option 4.2 and option 5.1 do not have the $100 million contingency that the Mr. Mogimi's plan had for us before. And I just want to acknowledge the point that Mayor Winfield is making, if I understand it correctly, that and I believe that Ms. Campbell also made it, is that we need to continue being able to be open to the citizens of our region to make sure that we don't lose that support, right? And so even though we might think it's a perfect plan, the citizens might not. And so that additional layer of input is could help us at the end sell the plan. So I'm just thinking of even if we were to dissolve, and I don't know if we can do this, if we do dissolve, that the Citizens Advisory Committee at least be presented the final plan. If I see what I'm saying, if we dissolve the Citizens Advisory Committee, then I don't know if we can go back to them and say, hey, look, this is what the TMC and the RTA board have concluded based on your input and your years of support. Give us input.
Yeah, I don't think, remember, I didn't use the word dissolve. So,
Okay.
but what I did use, this is complete.
Okay.
Because we have 2 plans in front of us. Let's take because you're right. I've heard a lot of the council meetings, as you know, I listen to the study sessions and such. I hear about pavement preservation or road modernization, you know, for RTA. If we go introduce something like that back into the Citizen Advisory Committee process, we're not going to have a plan in January. We're not going to have a plan in February. We're not going to have a plan in March. There's nothing that prevents us from taking it back to the chairs and their teams and asking them for their opinion on the plan we're putting forward. But we've got to start this movement, the ball movement. We really do. And they've worked hard. I do not want to, and I hope it doesn't come across into the chairs. I hope it doesn't come across at all as I was with you for a while on trying to work this during when we weren't making any progress from the board and it was all falling on you. And I think you're so close Your voices will be important. What will be really important will be what level of support we get from the Citizens Advisory Committee members when this is over. And even I think if you come to a consensus plan, you still may not get 100% support, but I hope we do. And I think your voices, why Tom, you're right, you need to be able to communicate with them. But I think the two of you, particularly, and Mary, can all provide that input to us and the TMC going forward on what you believe they want. What I'm not sure what you'd even think if we introduced topics and categories that aren't currently in your plan, because it would just this community loves to talk.
Are you through?
I'm done.
Are you done?
I'm done, sir.
Mr. Benavides.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I got to say, I'm concerned because I don't see any language here that said that we're going to consider disbanding the CAC. It makes me nervous to do it. I don't think that we, under the open meeting law, that we should do that. I just don't see the language.
We should
here.
do what? I'm sorry.
Disband. We're talking about disbanding the CAC.
Oh, that you're recommending that we do not disband.
And the other thing is, I'm worried we're going to create ambiguity anyway about whether they exist or they
Or
don't
not.
exist. So that's going to cause problems in the open meeting law too. So all of it that's making them comfortable, I just wanted to take that out.
Okay.
So I guess I would ask the question. Because one, I didn't say the word disband, two viable options to the board. Their service is complete and the CAC and its members are relieved of any further obligation. So the CAC still exists. It's just no longer got an obligation to work on a plan to get one to us. They've given us two. If we want to go back to them at any time as a board, we're capable to do that. The CAC has not been disbanded.
Okay, so
I'm just saying that. So, I mean, I'll read it again. Furthermore, with the delivery of two viable options to the board, their service is complete and the CAC and its members are relieved of any further obligation. It didn't disband the CAC, it didn't say they don't exist anymore. They've done what we tasked them to do, and that was bring us a plan they brought us to. We can call them back up. We can go get their input. We can hold another meeting if we want. So it's not setting them aside.
Okay.
It's just saying we need to take this and go forward.
Who is we?
The board.
This board.
This board.
Okay, that, all right, Mr.
Well,
Benavides?
let me just please bear with me. I just want to make sure that when you say they have no obligation, they're still under a legal obligation. They're a part of the committee that exists. They're still under the legal obligations, to follow the open meeting law. Sir, do you have is there language you would prefer that we change the? I don't think there are any, I don't think we can say that they're not under obligation. Okay.
Just for clarification, Mr. Chair. When they were voted in and recommended, there's a timeline to that, right?
3 years.
And it doesn't end when they finish a report. It finishes when that board needs to be reinstated or however, right? As an entity.
Well, I mean, this board formed and this board.
Well,
could
I know that.
disband
It's
it.
just that when we signed out who could be new board members and some of them have a time span. So whatever they do.
Like a
within-
term.
Right, like I have 4 years, you have.
Right, what
you
we
know,
did before, Mr. Chairman and Thomas, we had the CAC. And then this committee, the executive committee, decided on a plan. It was dormant, not necessarily disbanded. And then when we started talking about RTA next, we asked if any of them wanted to come back and serve on an active committee, of which 23 of 35 or something did. But it was not an active committee. It wasn't disbanded. But there were no meetings or anything.
Mr. Chair, if I may, and if I understood the motion correctly, please allow us some time to craft the language to make sure that Mr. Benavides' concern is addressed. I think we understand the purpose. I think we can get to that language, but make sure that it's correct.
The intent is that we accept these two plans.
Mhm.
That's it.
And we come up with some program or some idea to move forward with these two plans.
Mhm. I like the intent of the motion. I like the idea of, with a friendly amendment of having our CAC chairs participate with TMC. But I do also like the idea of once we have a plan, that we present and garner further input if we want that, if we, the RTA board, further want that. But, you know, I agree, help us with the language so that we all do the right thing with the intent of Mr. Maxwell's motion.
Mr. Chair, and I think that's, if we don't disband, you know, we can say, just like we could say a year ago, we're gonna take it there. And to the mayor's point, or sorry, the chairman's point, that it doesn't mean their term is up, but we're not asking anything of them until we decide to ask something of them. So I don't think, you know, I think it's the disband.
I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, again, I think I understand the intent of the motion allows us to work with the language. So if you don't mind, we'll do that and make
If
sure.
we're gonna
that
wait
the-
till January to do it, do they have a meeting scheduled before then?
No, I think we should
I
vote
think
on
we-
it today.
Yeah, I think we're good. I got the language.
Vote on it today.
Thank you. No, I
No,
appreciate
no,
it.
I really think we should, if you could, you need 2-minute break and then you help us or however you want to do it, but I think we should vote on this.
Because we already have a motion on the floor, but I mean, what I understand the motion to be after discussion is move to issue a proclamation thanking the CAC for all of their years of hard work, good work. And that the board is ready to run their recommended plans, and that we have no further work for them to do for the time being.
But that is not absolutely correct because we can ask them for further work. So, or an input and feedback, right? Just like we're asking the community to give us input.
Furthermore, with the delivery of 2 viable options to the board, we accept those plans. We appreciate your continued, don't know if I want to use the word service, but Rex, you got a suggestion?
I
Gotta turn to the elected officials. You guys know these these.
I think that Mr. Benavides, when he used the 4 words "for the time being," covers us. Because, and I appreciate Mayor Mahoney adding his historic perspective, because I think, again, for the time being means that we can rely on their services again moving forward.
One last chance. I'd like to modify that into, furthermore, with the delivery of the 2 viable options to the board, which we accept. Their service is complete in the CAC and its members are relieved of any further obligation at this until further required, or further notice further required, whatever word works best.
Good with that as a second.
I am.
It's they're still under the legal obligation though to comply with the rules of the committee and the law. I just want to get that
Yeah,
right.
so again, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, we'll adjust it to make sure it's correct, but we understand the intent.
So you're asking us to vote on something we don't know the language of. Just want to make sure that's what you're
I
asking.
think we need to put the language together before we vote and the friendly amendment.
All right, folks, I want to get on for dinner. Please pull the board on the motion.
Mayor Tony,
Aye.
Mayor Tom Murphy,
Aye.
General Ted Maxwell,
Aye.
Mayor Joe Winfield,
Okay.
Supervisor Rex Scott,
Aye.
Chairman Peter Yucapicio,
That means yes. No.
Mayor Regina Romero,
Aye.
and Mayor Paul Diaz.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Chair.
Well, didn't mean to make so much more work.
Wow. So, we have any more on this?
Mr. Chair.
I believe Supervisor Scott wanted to make additional comments.
I do, and I'm going to slide that down to General Maxwell and Mayor Murphy, if you could start these around. And I'm going to apologize. I never know how many folks we're going to have in our audience. And as you're, and I don't know if there's staff who could make copies for folks in the audience, but
I got it. I'm sorry. I didn't notice you're doing that.
one of thank you, Mayor Murphy. I didn't know you were going to do that. Thank you. You're very kind.
Thank you.
I will tell you that one thing that I am always cognizant of whenever I come into one of these meetings is that everybody around this table and everybody in this room has one thing in common. You are all residents of Pima County. And so one thing that I always try to keep in mind is that anything that I put forth needs to be something that is fair to all of the people of Pima County. And we heard some comments earlier about the need for a hybrid plan, the need for a compromise plan, that we need to we need to find somewhere in the middle. And we also heard Mr. McGovern say that naming of categorical projects, sub-element breakdown, project changes of various sorts, discussion of contingencies, all of these factors weigh in on the creation of the document that you have in front of you. And whenever I present something to you, it is not just something coming out of my office. This is representative of work from the entire county team. Ms. Lesher, Mr. DeBonis, Ms. Skinner, our transportation department chair, and Ms. Hiller from my office. So what you have on the front side of this document is a table that shows the amounts devoted to each element in option 4.2 and option 5.1. And then you have in the third column those the hybrid plan that the Pima County team is putting forth. You can see that there is somewhat less in corridors, and I'm going to get to how we did that, and yet still are able to move forward with the vast majority of jurisdictional priority corridor projects. You'll see the difference in transit, in safety, active transportation, and some of the other elements. As Mayor Winfield alluded to earlier, making reference to matters that were discussed at the TMC meeting, we do have, Pima County does have a $20 million grant from the federal government as part of the RAISE program, and that stands for Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. We do have a $20 million RAISE grant that we intend to devote to the Valencia project. And we also, and that would, 10 million of that would go to safety, 10 million of that would go to environment, since it wouldn't be needed in the corridor area. The Shannon Road project is envisioned to go from Club to Tangerine. The Oro Valley portion of that project is Lambert to Tangerine. What we are proposing is that the county portion of that Shannon Road project be set aside, that we estimate that would free up an additional $20 million that we would put in economic contingency. Now it has to be verified by the consultants who are looking at the scope and cost of all of our projects, but that hits the table at the top of this document. The high points are we include the vast majority of all the jurisdictional priority corridor requests. We provide, as it says, robust investment to address regional transit needs, including the rapid transit proposal that is a high priority for the city from Tohono Ta'ai to downtown. We enhance the elements related to safety, active transportation, and wildlife linkages. We provide for the overlap funds that have been discussed in great detail at the CAC and TMC meetings to the tune of $40 million. And unlike the other two options, we include an additional $20 million for economic contingency. So I want to also thank the CAC for all of their dedicated work. It speaks not just to the time and thought that all of their members put into their efforts, but it also speaks to their commitment to our community. And with all that in mind, the motion that I want to make is on the back of this document. And I think it incorporates a lot of the concerns that we have heard during this discussion today, including making sure that the good work of the CAC is continued to be honored. And in a very fulsome way, as you will see. The motion is to direct the Technical Management Committee to, beginning with 4.2 and 5.1, continue to refine a plan for RTA board consideration at the January 2024 meeting. Receive a presentation from the Citizen Advisory Committee Informal Working Group. This is the informal working group that Ms. Campbell was referring to. The TMC would receive a presentation from that informal working group on their proposed categorical and sub-element framework. Because as Ms. Campbell mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of detail in that plan. 3, request written input from all jurisdictions as to confirming their priority named corridor projects and identifying safety and active transportation projects. That is, named projects that could go into the safety and active transportation elements. As Mr. McGovern alluded to, the city has already done that. The county has done that, although it wasn't presented, and we want the other jurisdictions to have time to do that. 4, the TMC would also incorporate identified named corridor safety and active transportation projects and ensure geographical distribution of benefits throughout the region and within each jurisdiction. That may be of a special importance to the city of Tucson, being our largest jurisdiction, obviously. So that is my motion.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Member Romero.
And, sorry, Mr. Chair, discussion. And the hope is that in January that basically it's an update and, you know, jurisdictions report back and verify they're ranked. What happens after?
The hope is that between now and our January meeting, the intent of this motion is that the TMC is going to do all of these things and then come to us in January with a plan. With a plan. And I realize that we have the holidays intervening between now and that January meeting. But I think the TMC, through an iterative process, and I know they had some discussion about this yesterday, has the time and capability to not only hear this presentation, but to take on the other items that are mentioned in the motion.
Mr. Chair, I have some clarifying questions.
Please.
You're gonna give people a break, right, on Christmas?
Maybe New Year's.
I am
And maybe
Supervisor.
New Year's?
I am Supervisor Scott, not Supervisor Scrooge.
Okay. I just want to be realistic about, people's vacation time and all the work that they, people deserve a little bit of a break. I just want to clarify, your hybrid proposal is, we're not accepting that into your motion, correct? It's just an imagination, because, I mean, we are not saying, yes, I want to go with the numbers. These are the numbers. And so,
yes, ma'am.
Can you clarify?
No, thank you for asking that question. We put those numbers in there because we felt that they were the beginning of a compromise between 4.2 and 5.1. But the motion is beginning with 4.2 and 5.1, continue to refine a plan for RTA board consideration at the January 2024 meeting.
All right,
I
I just
appreciate that.
wanted to make sure that we were not voting on your numbers.
No, ma'am.
Okay, good. I like the motion because it is thorough and it gives all of us, including the Citizens Advisory Committee, and continue giving input and feedback and being part of the process of finalizing and coming back to us with a plan. So I as long as we can continue the discussion and the jurisdictions can give additional input, I'm golden with this motion.
Thank you, Norma.
Thank you.
Is there a conflict with the last motion we had and this motion?
I would think it's not, Mr. Chair, because it's the Citizens Advisory Committee Informal Working Group, and really all we said is that they don't have to work directly on submitting a plan to us. We've accepted the two plans that they sent us.
And this is not binding. This is just guidelines for a working document.
Mayor Honey, yes. This is a motion in terms of direction to the TMC. And one of the one of the directions to the TMC is that they hear the presentation from the informal working group regarding their categorical and sub-element framework.
A second question.
Please.
Did anybody on this board have access to this document before you handed it out here?
Did anybody on this board?
Regional Council.
I did share it with General Maxwell. Yes, sir.
I mean, prior to today.
No, this was developed by the county team after discussions that I had with Mr. DeBonis yesterday afternoon, and then I gathered with him, Ms. Lesher, Ms. Skinner, and Ms. Hiller this morning. I did share it with General Maxwell on my way to this meeting.
This is a general guideline. They could vary from this. This is just kind of a suggestion of how to merge.
The motion, if you're referring, as Mayor Romero was, to these figures, those are suggestions from the county based on a hybrid approach to 4.2 and 5.1. But the motion is that the TMC is going to look at 4.2, 5.1, continue to refine a plan for RTA board consideration at the January 2024 meeting. We offer our figures to be helpful, to be assistive, but not to be any kind of rigid framework. The motion is what we're asking the TMC to do.
Mr. Chair, if I may, and if I understood your question correctly, and if I may ask for a clarifying question.
Please.
Would it be more appropriate to say CAC officers because the previous motion identified CAC officers to stay involved?
Well, my understanding would be that if when that is presented to the TMC, it would very likely be presented by Ms. Campbell.
Yeah, so I think that would clarify it for staff because we don't know who the informal group is, but CAC officers would meet your intent.
I think yes.
Okay.
And I think it's pretty clear because of discussions that occurred at the CAC and the TMC earlier this week that Ms. Campbell is actively involved with that working group and she is a vice chair of the CAC.
I appreciate it. Again, if you don't mind, if you make that change, I think it'll give us the clarity.
Certainly.
Thank you.
If that's okay with the seconder.
I like the idea of being able to have that working group present, represented by, one person can speak, but I like the idea of having working group present. Like you presented your motion.
Well, she would be making the presentation. Yeah. And it's the result of the work of her group.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I just want to be consistent with what the chairman just said. To be consistent with the previous motion, it makes sense to have the.
I think we are being consistent with the previous motion because we included at this time. But now we're saying
And let's be
We got
real,
more work to do.
yeah, let's be real clear, Mr. Chair, please. Be real clear, the last motion wasn't that we were eliminating everything that's done. That informal working group from the CAC still's an informal working group. They could do all the talking they want. So I don't think it's, that last motion was, since you're gonna work on the language, and I want to be very clear that I think what we've said was, we've accepted the two plans. They don't need to work to submit another plan to us unless we're giving them more guidance. This, to me, is a little clarifying guidance of how we're going to engage it. We can come back to the CAC at any time and ask them to give us information. That's all we're doing.
I understand that, Mr. Chair. Again, do you agree with that modification? Because I think that really gives us clarity.
I think we're splitting hairs, Mr. Mogini, with all due respect.
Okay.
I think the motion is pretty clear as to what we're doing, and I think we are splitting hairs by saying you don't know who the informal working group is, but you're very aware of who sought to try and present that data to both the CAC and the TMC. Was informed that they couldn't, so it's pretty simple to follow up on that.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. I think by saying the officer, that's all of us saying, the officers.
I think the language that you presented in your motion is fine, and I continue supporting that.
Okay.
And continue
Thank
seconding that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it is pretty clear. Right.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to take advantage of your institutional memory. In 2006, there was a CAC, there was a Citizens Advisory Committee, there was the Technical Management Committee. The ultimate plan that came for RTA, did that come from CAC? Did it come from TMC? Who did the plan come from?
Came from the board. This board.
Came from the board, but there's a recommendation.
There were recommendations from the CAC. But once the recommendations came to the board refined the recommendations. And that was where the final plan that we submitted. Which is kind of where I think we're trying to get here as well.
Are we?
Is that correct? Anybody disagree with that?
I don't disagree with that.
I'll just say it looks like this is coming then from the TMC and not from the CAC. We're directing the TMC. I probably said that acronym incorrectly. We're directing the TMC.
Sure, Mr. Chair, if I may, let's remember, Mayor Winfield, that 4.2 and 5.1, which are a substantive part of this motion, came to us from the CAC. As our previously passed motion said, we accept those two plans as the basis for what we're doing. There's been much discussion from the CAC officers, the TMC liaisons, people on this body, that we are so close to compromise. And we feel that this motion is going to get us there. And it still honors the work of the CAC, and it also specifically honors the proposal made by the informal CAC working group so that they can formally present the results of their exertions to the TMC.
But the final decision still
always.
I
Yes, sir.
understand that.
Mr. Chair,
General
I can actually,
Maxwell.
I understand what Mayor Winfield's saying, and when I saw this just before lunch, before we walked in here, I said to him, "Are you telling me that your proposal means the TMC is going to bring the plan we want to consider?" And the answer was no, it's still for discussion, because I truly believe that there's going to be things that they may come back with that we're still not going to like, that might be part of 4.2 or 5.1. So I don't think we're giving them authority to come back to us with a single plan. It's just, we want them to continue to do some, because the TMC took no position. They gave us main insight on, from a technical perspective, what they thought of either plan, and if there's options to change. I'm currently supportive of this idea, because I think it gives us direction of how we are going to work towards that plan. But ultimately, I do not want to eliminate 4.1 or 5.2. That's not what I think this motion does. Sorry, had it backwards. 4.2 and 5.1. Today, maybe it should be 4.1 or 5.2. I don't know. But so unless I'm wrong in my misunderstanding it,
You're not.
Just for them to work towards giving us some input for our next meeting so we can be more effective.
Mr. Chair, I completely associate myself with General Maxwell's remarks and what you said. Ultimately, this is our call. But based on everything that we've heard today about being so close, Pima County feels that this motion will get us to the point where in January, we've got more substance to discuss.
And we don't have to accept the plan from the TMC and the working group either, but it's a suggestion of a
Yes,
plan.
sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else?
No, I was just gonna say, and I'll end with that, that my expectation would be that that allows the discussion for us. It's not a TMC plan. In my mind, it's just to take one more step.
Yes, sir.
To get it in January for us then to take over. That would be my expectation.
Agreed.
Are we good?
Good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Item 9, motion to adjourn.
Carries unanimously.
Hey.
That was having fun. Right. It's a choice.